And we are live. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me in this Star Wars conversation. I am joined, of course, by the coach, Kyle Newman.
What's up, brother Seth?
What's up, buddy?
Not
And
much.
George, do you still want to go by Cam Newton Loftus? It's not football season anymore.
It's not football season. It's baseball season because I think the Celtics are going to get bounced in the first back-to-back playing games. I'll stick with Cam. I'm still excited for football. Yeah, I'll stick
It's
with Cam.
always football season.
It's a good point.
So, gentlemen, this is, of course, a spin-off episode from our normal series of Frame Skip, and we wanted to talk about Star Wars. And I wanted to have a discussion around the sequel trilogy first, because I feel like out of almost anything in nerd culture, the sequel trilogy of Star Wars might be the most divisive set of movies ever. Maybe. I mean, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that was more divisive and had more vitriol surrounding it of nerd culture than Star Wars episode 7, 8, 9.
Which is really strange to me because I think this is why you wanted me on the podcast. I think it's the second best trilogy. I think it is hands down got the second best bang for buck, just proportion, ratio, the best stuff happens in that second most. Obviously first is the original trilogy. I really can't stand the prequel trilogy whatsoever. I think it is abhorrent cinema. And I think episode 1 is the best of the three.
Yeah, so the reason I wanted, and I was so excited to have this, was because we all have vastly different views on this trilogy. George, I know you like it quite a lot. And Coach, I know you dislike the sequels quite a lot. And I'm somewhere in the middle. I think it starts out really strong and then drops off pretty intensely.
I will say that this is episode 7 is my favorite of the sequel trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
By far, it's my favorite, and it's not a bad movie. It's not a bad Star Wars movie. It's good, and we're going to talk about the good points and the bad points. So, but yeah.
Well, I wanted to start out by talking about the context of this movie, because I feel like you can't talk about this movie in a vacuum without understanding the context and where it came out in. So the movie was released on December 18th, 2015. It's hard to believe that was 6 years ago. Well, like 5.5. And it was the first live-action Star Wars movie since 2005. We had the Clone Wars movie, which wasn't great. That came before the Clone Wars series. And I don't remember exactly what year that came out, but I want to say like 2009, 2008.
Yeah, it was like a year or two after Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, I remember it not being very well received, and that kind of taking a lot of the steam out of the animated series, which is unfortunate because the animated series is great. But you don't like the Clone Wars?
I'm not the biggest Clone Wars fan.
That is an unpopular opinion, sir.
I know. Rebels, man. Rebels is great, but Clone Wars,
I agree.
Meh.
Rebels is really good.
Especially season 2.
Yeah, especially season 2. So I wish they would have kept the more PG nature of the Clone Wars, though. I thought that it got a little too child-friendly, but it's still good. The story designs are really good. But at the point when Episode 7 had come out, we hadn't really gotten a major Star Wars release in a long time. And I think the general consensus was that Star Wars had kind of stagnated. The prequel trilogy was not very well received, and we weren't getting much interesting stuff from the expanded universe at that point. We had already kind of seen the next 100 years in the expanded universe. So Disney bought Lucasfilm on October 30th, 2012, right before Halloween, and that gave them a little over 3 years to come out with Episode 7, The Force Awakens, and that was actually delayed. It was supposed to come out in the spring or fall, I think, but it got pushed back to December. And the script was completed on... I think it said... It was completed over 6 weeks, and the script was completed in 2014 or 2013 as well. So the reason I'm saying this is because I think this movie was doomed from the start to have a lot of fan vitriol, because on January 6, 2014, Disney made the controversial, yet in my opinion necessary move to scrap the EU, the expanded universe. And I wanted to pull up this Wikipedia entry here. Star Wars: Force Awakens. Give me 1 second. Because I think this Wikipedia entry is really telling of why this trilogy had so many issues. The first screenplay was written by Michael Ardent. I'm not very familiar with him. And then they took him out of it and replaced him with J.J. Abrams. And he was named the director in 2013. Abrams expressed relief that the release date was announced for December 2015 instead of a previously discussed summer release. He and Kasdan planned the story while walking in Santa Monica, New York City, Paris, and London. The first draft was completed in 6 weeks. Abrams said the film was to be returned to the roots of the first Star Wars films and be based more on emotion than explanation. In January 2014, Abrams confirmed that the script was complete. In April 2014, Lucasfilm clarified that episodes 7 through 9 would not feature storylines from the Star Wars Expanded Universe, so other elements could be included, as with the TV series Star Wars Rebels. So there's the kind of the context of how this movie was developed, and I can't imagine that while the Expanded Universe is in such turmoil and you're writing a movie that's supposed to take place in that you're going to get very consistent writing. Do you guys see what I'm saying there?
Yeah, no, and I get it. And even to this day, I wonder why the Disney execs like Kathleen Kennedy, why they didn't go to Timothy Zahn, why they didn't go to Michael Stackpole, these authors that have been writing for them for help, for guidance. Because J.J. Abrams, he's not a Star Wars guy. Right?
He is a Star Wars guy. The reason he took Star Trek was because he said he really cares about Star Wars. He would never direct a Star Wars movie because he was afraid he would ruin it. Like, he wants to enjoy Star Wars. So that was why he directed Star Trek, because he said, quote, "I don't really give a shit about Star Trek, so I'll direct that." He's a huge Star Wars guy. Like, he's the student of Spielberg. Like, this is very, very much like his jam.
But the thing is at least with David Filoni, at least with Filoni and Jon Favreau, but with Filoni through the Clone Wars and through Rebels, he kept it with the way that Lucas would have done it, right? He kept it in that realm. But we see that Abrams and who's the author of the second one?
Rian Johnson.
They kind of started to do their own thing, right? They kind of started to implement things that I don't think Lucas would have, that doesn't really make a lot of sense, which we'll talk about in a bit.
So I wanted to read this second entry because that's what I wanted to talk about also, is that Disney made, in my opinion, the baffling decision to have 3 different directors for the sequels.
Why is that baffling? The original trilogy had 3 different directors.
And I know that. I understand that. But the thing is that it's pretty clear to me when watching these movies that they didn't have any plot laid out, and that was later confirmed when I forget which writer came out and said that throughout the whole sequel trilogy they kept changing Rey's parentage until they finally landed on the Palpatine. And that was kind of like the big thing to me, because as we'll talk about here a little later, they tease Rey's parentage quite a lot, especially in this first movie. And for them to not really have any sort of solid plan is quite strange to me. And I don't have a problem with having 3 different directors, but at least have one coherent storyline. But here's the Wikipedia part that I wanted to read. Abrams stated that he purposefully withheld some plot elements from The Force Awakens, such as Rey and Finn's last names and backgrounds. Kathleen Kennedy, admitted that we haven't mapped out every single detail of the sequel trilogy yet, but said that Abrams was collaborating with Last Jedi director Rian Johnson, and that Johnson would work with The Rise of Skywalker's then director Colin Trevorrow to ensure a smooth transition and that everyone got a say in how we move forward with this. Daisy Ridley later recounted that J.J. Abrams had written drafts for episodes 8 and 9. So I find all that quite strange, because it seems to me that Rian Johnson, when he took over The Last Jedi, took a curveball to J.J. Abrams' story, and that can be felt in the third movie, in which J.J. Abrams clearly gave a middle finger to Rian Johnson in the dialogue, especially with Luke Skywalker. I can't see how you could see Luke Skywalker's scene in the third movie and not view it as anything other than a giant middle finger to Rian Johnson. You know?
No, it was in direct conflict with everything that he said was his philosophy in episode 8. So it was absolutely a giant middle finger.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. It seems that there was giant conflict within the writing team of the sequel trilogy, and I don't understand why Disney would spend so much money on Star Wars and then rush it out the gate for no reason. You only get to make the sequel trilogy once. You know, you would think that they would want to have a solid plan and execute that plan well. Because we also see later on that Colin Trevorrow, am I pronouncing that right? Trevorrow, he had a finished script for episode 9, and if you read through it, it sounds super dope. It sounds really cool.
That guy's super cool. I was a film major at University of Vermont, and that guy lived in Burlington at the time. And right when his movie Safety Not Guaranteed was coming out, he actually came in and did like a Q&A at our class. Like, that guy's super cool.
Yeah. Well, did you read his leaked script that came out for the Duel of Fates?
I did not know.
It had a lot of really cool elements, and I'll be honest, when I read that script, I was like, I wish Disney wouldn't have pulled him. I wish he would have was able to make this, because it was way better than the episode 9 that we actually got. In my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, is this first episode going to be just about like the trilogy at large, or is it going to be about episode 7? Okay.
It's going to be about episode 7. I just wanted to frame the context of episode 7 in the sequel trilogy before we move into the actual beat by beat of the movie. All
right, then I will save my episode 9 criticism for episode 9 then.
Yeah, and there's a lot of criticism to levy at episode 9 for sure. So do we have anything else to say? I do want to say I generally love episode 7. I think episode 7 is a great movie. A little too similar to A New Hope for my taste, but I think it's super enjoyable. I watched, I think, 4 times in the theater. I remember crying when the Star Wars music hit and the pre-roll came out. Yeah. I when I heard that, I was like, I can't believe that I'm actually sitting in the theaters watching a Star Wars movie on opening night again, because it seemed like for the longest time we were never going to see this. I mean, Lucas said over and over and over again he wasn't going to make sequels. Turns out he was kind of a liar, because he wrote drafts for the plots. I don't know what he was waiting for. I guess he just hates money, but
well, I mean, obviously the dude's like a perfectionist, you know? Like, I don't know how you could see what he's done to his own original trilogy, which is like a beloved movie series and has been pretty beloved since it came out. You know, like
Yeah,
it's not like it took time for people to come around to the idea of Star Wars. It was pretty immediate. And the fact that
right.
he just always goes in and tinkers every different format release, tinkered before VHS came out, tinkered before like the Laserdisc, and tinkered on like the 20th anniversary. Like it's infuriating, and then
Well,
like tinkered
yes.
before the Blu-ray cuts, and it's just like there's always something like a little different. So I do believe that he wasn't intending to make a sequel trilogy, because this dude seems like kind of haunted and consumed by his art and a desire for it to be innovative and transformational, which is ironic because like I think the movies are super derivative, and that's why I love it, because it synthesizes all these different feelings you get from different types of art, different types of storytelling, and jams all that together in one thing, which I think is like really cool. Like you're just getting it's like a buffet of different feelings from watching stuff, which is why I like him. So I don't believe he's going to make a sequel story.
I
But
don't know if he wanted to because of how mean people were to him. You know,
True.
I mean, like
True.
there were adults that were acting like little 4-year-old kids, with their displeasure of Jar Jar, with their displeasure of Anakin, and with their displeasure of Jake Lloyd.
Well,
And
unfortunately,
all
that's
and all
something that we
three of those actors have had a tough time,
right.
yeah,
And what what's it? What's his name? Ahmad Best. Is he the one that did Jar Jar?
Yeah.
I think he even had thoughts of suicide because he just got put into a dark place. So, Lucas was like, "Why? Why continue doing this if people are gonna suck like this in our fandom?"
also, why be mad at the dude when it was clearly George
Right?
Lucas who wrote the dialogue, who directed, who oversaw like the exact special effect production that went into making? It's like, yeah, I mean, I guess you could be mad at the guy, but like it's really like George is the one pulling the strings there, like quite
Right.
literally.
And unfortunately, that is something that we saw get repeated in the sequel trilogy. I mean, the fans were absolutely rabid towards the actors. All the main cast have said pretty clearly they don't want anything to do with Star Wars
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah,
And it's like I don't really blame them.
No,
Because
dude.
I think all of them did excellent jobs in their acting and portrayals of the character, especially Daisy Ridley. And they just got crapped on for it.
That's the worst part. Like they're literally doing what someone else told them to do, and what no doubt hundreds, like dozens, if not hundreds of people had a hand in contributing towards, like
Yes.
just in terms of like deciding the actual story direction. Like there's no way they didn't have a discussion about every single scene that was in that movie with dozens of people, hundreds of people.
Right. Right.
And so it's just like, why are you getting mad at the, like, literally, like, don't shoot the messenger. Like, they're the ones who are telling someone else's story right now. You think John Boyega had any hand in constructing, like, how Finn was supposed to deliver this one line? Like, nah, man, he didn't.
Right.
Like, he absolutely
And he
did
was
not.
such a highlight in this movie too.
Absolutely.
I really liked Finn's character.
He crushed it in this, and Oscar
Yeah.
Isaac was so good. And,
Yep.
God, their
Yeah, so
chemistry
let's
is
talk.
awesome together. It's
Let's
so
talk
good.
about some of the characters. Specifically, I want to talk about the main cast because there's a main cast of 3, which was only supposed to be a main cast of 2. Poe was supposed to die in this movie up until I believe very late in filming, and you can kind of feel that because like he's absent from like 80% of the movie.
Yeah.
But what do you guys think of the character of Rey, played by Daisy Ridley?
Overall, for this episode,
Episode 7 in a
okay.
vacuum.
So at the beginning, I fell in love with her character because she was a loner. She was on this world by herself, so she was a survivor. And when she took out those guys trying to get BB-8, at the little bazaar, wherever, when she met up with Finn,
Mm-hmm.
that was like awesome. I thought that was awesome. She had her weapon and she took him out. So at that point, and even with the fact that she jumped into the Millennium Falcon not knowing how to fly it, where she was able to fly it, I was okay with that because that in itself was a cool scene with the 2 TIE fighters chasing her, right? I really like that scene. but it was the last, the last part of the movie where I didn't like, but we'll get to there.
Yeah.
But overall, I liked her character.
All right, George.
I absolutely, yeah, I'm with Coach. I loved her. Also, one thing I really want to point out is I think her her theme, her score is like incredible, because that seemed to like marry like sort of like the traditional Star Wars trickle with like a little like excitement from like the Harry Potter stuff that John Williams did. Like I thought that was like a really really powerful, just like little tiny part of the movie. It was just like the music associated with her, but I thought that stuff was really
Right.
good. Yeah, I'm with Coach. I'm with Coach, except I didn't fall off. Like, I'm sure we'll come to this like towards the end of it, but if you're telling me about space wizards, I'm going to believe that they can instinctually do stuff that doesn't make sense.
Well, I think when you craft a fantasy world, and there's obvious examples of this, but Tolkien is one of the best. I always put him in the top tier for crafting fantasy worlds. You craft rules around that get followed. And I think one of the biggest tragedies of the sequel trilogy is they consistently break the rules of Star Wars in ways that don't really make sense because they create a lot of plot holes. Specifically with Rey's character, I'm with you guys. I absolutely love Rey, and I sat here and I tried to think of the reasons I like Rey's character, and I really can't give you many, other than I think Daisy Ridley did an excellent job acting. I think she's just a fun character. She's got a cool design to her, and that's pretty much all I can come to, because when you look at her story on paper, there's really not a whole lot to work with. She's just kind of this loner, and I think a lot of the episode 7's reason why I liked her so much is because of the mystery surrounding her character. They pull you in with this hook, like, who is this girl and why is she able to do the things she's able to do, and what's her parentage? Because it's not like they just dump information on you about her parentage. They specifically leave it. They specifically, and we'll get to this later on. There's a specific scene that they leave ambiguous about who she is.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with Han Solo and Maz Kanata at the bar, they make it very obvious that there was something else going on here.
When she asks, "Who's the girl?"
Yeah,
because she asked her, "Who's the girl?"
And then the scene cuts very hard, and it's like, you guys were purposefully trying to make us think something else was going on.
Who did you guys think she was the kid of?
Oh, I think I did think, and I still think to this day, that the original plan was for her to be a Kenobi.
Yeah, I thought it was Kenobi and Satine.
Yeah,
which would have been dope.
The storylines lined up a little too weird for me for it to not be like that. Especially with Obi-Wan talking to her when she picks up the lightsaber, and it would have just made sense, because then it would have been the son of, or the offspring of Kenobi and the offspring of Anakin Skywalker at the end, just like a generational thing. I think that would have made a lot of sense, but that's obviously not what we got. But let's move on to Finn, who I think has one of the coolest backstories and the coolest stories of any character in Star Wars. The Turncoat Stormtrooper, which I think is an awesome story. I think he got absolutely shafted after this movie in terms of his story. With almost no character development whatsoever after this movie. But in this movie, he's very cool. And he's just like this funny guy, and you see from the beginning of the movie something went wrong with his brainwashing, and he's just a dude with a good heart who just chose he didn't want to be part of the Empire. What do you guys think of Finn?
Well, I felt for him when he when they got back over to the big dreadnought, right, to the Super Star Destroyer, whatever you want to call it, and he took off his helmet, right, and he was having an anxiety attack, right, because of what he just witnessed. So, a lot of soldiers go through that, right? So that's modern day. So, But yeah, they started his character off with this movie so strong, right? Just so strong, and he was he was one of the highlights of the movie, I think.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
Dude was just super cool, like
yeah,
from the first scene, because it was really nice. Because I don't know, like when you see a character like Kylo Ren, like that, I think that opening scene where they like go down to, they're on Jakku, right? Like that's like where the
yes,
old dude is hiding.
yes,
Um, and Kylo Ren is just has that one line. Is just like, "Look how old you've become." Like
yes,
I don't know the context for that whatsoever, but it's such a badass opening line where it's just the first thing he's doing is just taking a dump on this like highly respected actor who is in
yeah,
fact super old. I really love that. And then just like seeing like the one stormtrooper like struggle, because like I think as the audience, like we've been waiting so long for more Star Wars stuff, and like we don't know anything about this era of Star Wars. This was like our first introduction to it, but like
right,
we know so much about Star Wars that we're trying to like fill in the gaps. And so you see the first order troopers, and so you're immediately like, archetypes, I get this, these are the stormtroopers, this is what they've become. And then to just immediately see one, like Coach said, have an anxiety attack and panic, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is actually like a different Star Wars, because all we've ever seen people who dress like this do is follow orders implicitly without hesitation. And
and
so the
just
fact,
die.
yeah, and be bad at their job.
Yeah,
And so just to immediately see that I thought was like such a cool way to introduce that, like, this is going to be a different feeling Star Wars, which is
mhm.
super ironic because this movie is just like, it's episode 4, man. Like, all due respect, like
Right.
it is just such like a close proximity to episode 4, but it does so many things I think very interesting, and like Finn is just such a cool place to like pick a main character from. I wish they kept him as the main character or a main
Yes.
character,
yeah.
but I mean that's just
He could have
such a
gone
cool
pretty
place to
far.
start.
He did, even if he didn't, because some people were speculating that he had force abilities.
Sensitivity.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, even with that, I mean, he had his military training, so I get it how he could wield the lightsaber a little bit. But
But that, I
anyways,
mean, I get that makes perfect sense to me. Like, I understand that, like, to be god tier with a lightsaber, you need to be like highly endowed with the Force. But it's really, it's just a stick made out of light, man. Like, you're telling me that they don't have some kind of combat form in Star Wars that operates with a stick, and that a dude can just like make pretty educated guesses with it, even though he's not a Jedi. Like, that part I thought made perfect sense. Like, Kyle Katarn was that way, right? In the Dark Forces games, like.
Yeah, at first, but again, the EU wasn't written by people that I would say were consistent. Uh, and Kyle Katarn's story is like out of control if you follow it, because like he picks up a lightsaber, and like 3 days later he kills a dark Jedi in that the Asian dark Jedi with the yellow lightsaber. I forget his name, but
Yeah, don't love that. But that's, I mean, it's whatever, you know, like it's a fine
yeah,
game.
I
Yeah.
I think they gave him too much of an ability at the end when he was fighting Kylo.
I agree. Now, and we're gonna get to Kylo's character. Kylo's power level is so inconsistent though that you never really know if this dude's like legitimate or if he's like a crybaby wannabe. That's my biggest problem with him. But we'll get to him. Overall, I'd say Finn, top tier character, and then which rounds out the main cast with Poe. Poe, I think, is the weakest of the three in this movie, especially because he wasn't supposed to live, and then I forget the reason they brought him back, but I assume it's because Oscar Isaac has just nailed the character and the relationship between Poe and or Pin. I can't speak. Finn
Finn.
and Poe. I almost said foe and then
And
Pin. I was
Pin,
like,
yeah.
that dynamic between those two is so strong, and I think Poe plays a really important part of the movie by being like the ace rebellion pilot, and he's like the cool pilot because that's like a vacuum that's been in Star Wars forever. Like Han Solo was like the cool pilot, you know, and Poe kind of takes over like the Han Solo cool guy role. He's the funny guy, he's the cool guy, he's the charismatic guy, and he's on the first of the main characters we see. He's in the very opening shot of the movie. What did you guys think of Poe?
I liked him. I mean, like you know my background with Rogue Squadron, so that whole scene when they were right above the water going to Maz's cantina, right?
Oh,
I
God.
thought that was an amazing scene, right? That was an amazing scene. Poe's character is good.
Chills. Yeah, that seems great.
He had a good character, but yeah, they didn't utilize him as much as they should have, I think.
Here's my one criticism of that scene. And like, I understand you need to make like the pilot cool because so much of Star Wars is space and traveling, and like, I don't know, like there's like grounded, pious, religious Jedi, but then there's like this technological aspect that like you want someone to be able to take advantage of that just to create like, you know, a dichotomy, like good tension there. Like, I get it. I kind of hated the fact that he was like sniping individual First Order troopers with his X-wing. Like, I just thought that part was like dumb. I'm like, all right, you guys already established him as cool and badass because he killed like 9 TIE fighters in a row. You don't need to have him bullseye individual people from 3 miles away. Like, it's just a little too far.
You know, it's funny you were mentioning that because last night when I was watching it and that, you know, after that part, when he started sniping him, I'm like, okay, that's a little much, but.
Like, I think he's the most overpowered character in the entire movie. Like, the Rey stuff I can forgive, the Finn stuff I can forgive, especially because I read a theory on Reddit that I really enjoy, and I can't wait to bring it up with you guys. But, like, that part is just ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree. And to be fair, they try to give Poe some more character development in Episode 9, but that movie needed to be like 6 hours long to fit all the plot that J.J. Abrams tried to fit in Episode 9, which made it a complete mess of a movie. But let's move on to the main villain, not Snoke, but Kylo Ren, because I hate Kylo Ren, and it's because I think he's such a good, relatable character, because we've all known that guy, right? That snotty, like, just rich kid, can't handle any stress whatsoever, like, kid that like we all hate, the spoiled guy. He's the son of Princess Leia and Han Solo. His uncle is Luke Skywalker, and it just seems like this guy is spoiled, and he has 2 major meltdowns in this movie, which are both just kind of funny to me. When he doesn't get his way, he takes his lightsaber and starts smashing the inside of a spaceship. Not the best idea, in my opinion, but he does it. You know,
I actually like those parts.
Well, I don't dislike them. I just think you can't make me take a character seriously when he has just meltdowns constantly,
like a child. Yeah,
like a child. Yes.
So he's throwing a temper tantrum.
Yeah, he's throwing a temper tantrum, and that's, you can see why he was so easily influenced by Snoke.
Because he's a child. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Because I think he's actually in his late 20s in The Force Awakens, if I remember correctly. He was like 10. It's been like 10 years since the Attack on the Jedi Temple, right?
I think so.
Yeah, and he was like a late teenager at that point when Snoke finally pulled him over. But it's weird because I remember sitting there thinking that this guy didn't have any sort of training. They never really expand upon who he was before he was Kylo Ren and why he is the way he is. And I don't know if they were planning on going back and doing that in the later parts of the trilogy, but I remember just kind of thinking that he was a Padawan that turned to the dark side because he was powerful, because he was a Skywalker. And it turns out that's not really the case. I mean, it's kind of the case, but he was pretty much like a Jedi Knight when he took down the entire Jedi Academy. Which is like a little far-fetched, but okay.
Oh no, Jedi Academy was like 11 people, and it's not that like it was the best of the best. It was like the best of who's left after there was like, you know, a genocide of Force-sensitive people. So
right.
It's kind of like, we're doing the best with what we can, guys. Like, I'm really, like, bear with us here. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We can't all be the son or the nephew of Luke I killed Emperor Palpatine Skywalker,
Right.
like,
What did you guys think of Kylo Ren?
loved him. Absolutely loved him.
Explain why. Why did you like Kylo so much?
This trilogy is really hard for me to describe just because I think it is so conflicted in its messaging. But Kylo, I thought immediately was like a stand-in for the audience. Like he was supposed to be like the Star Wars fan who couldn't let go of the past and who like needed everything to be similar in order for it to be like likable and relatable.
Okay.
And so because of that, I think making him like such a bratty, flippant kid was incredible. Like
Yeah.
just being like, oh, hey, you guys who want exactly what's happened before, we'll give that to you. But this is like the piece of crap you look like, just so we're 110% clear. But just like the fact that he's like doing his best like Vader impression, I think is like really pathetic. And like there's something like really cool about that because he's like trying so hard to be like Vader, but like he was dead so long before he was born, like he just has like this idea of what Vader is, but like doesn't really understand the full commitment that Vader went to. It's just like, no, man, I was so scared of my wife dying, I killed her. Are you ready to commit to that? I really like his design. I like the lightsaber design. Also him freezing like the blaster bolt midair is like one of the coolest things I've seen a Jedi do.
That's one of the most savage. That was one of the most savage moments.
Like, it's so cool.
That opening scene is my second favorite of all.
Sequel?
Of all the 11 movies.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
it's awesome. Yeah, and that like I just think they did such a good job of introducing him as like a cool person. But like when he like kills Solo, sorry, spoilers. Like he's literally him like killing the past. Like it's him being like, no, we're done with this. And then that was like the full commitment arc for him in like episode 8 about how you have to kill your past. And then he just sort of is like it's just the fact that they like reforge his helmet immediately in episode 9 is just like, oh my god, like you missed the point entirely of episode 8. Like there were so many middle fingers that JJ was giving Rian Johnson in episode 9, and like the immediate reforging the helmet is one of them. Sorry, we're getting ahead, but like the fact that he was, at least in my eyes, like the stand-in for the petulant Star Wars fan, I just think is like incredible. It's also annoying, and I think that's where Star Wars kind of got off the rails, is the fact that it was so like metatextual. And I'm like, no, that's like not really what I want for my Star Wars. I want like space opera, like kind of like contrived good versus evil. Like I want it to be like a really simple moral story.
Right.
I don't really care for the gray stuff. Like put that in the side stories, that's fine. But like for the main Star Wars, I want it to be like a sweeping epic of good versus evil, not moral ambiguity. And like don't make comments in Star Wars, like make comments about like authority, like super like general vague things. But like I don't know, episode 8 kind of loses me where I'm like, I don't need to see about like the moral ambivalence of weapons manufacturers who are making a profit by selling to both the First Order and the Resistance.
That was a very prequel scene in episode 8, wasn't it?
Oh my god, yeah, just like, well, we haven't talked about galactic trading routes at all. It's like, do you absolutely have to? Like, no one was really scratching their heads asking about the Oregon Trail of Star Wars, but all right, that's fine.
Right. So you don't think that there was originally planned to be any redemption for Kylo Ren at the end of the trilogy?
I was kind of hoping that there wouldn't be, but at the same time, like that's a nice story, and like I subscribe to Star Wars for like honestly like kind of the simplicity of it, like and I'm excited to get to the prequel trilogy to tell you guys like exactly why I don't like it.
Okay.
But the one thing I do like about it is the simplicity of it, where like it feels just like a Greek myth, sort of like made with just really cool technology, with spaceships and robots, which is a kind of my speed for Star Wars.
Right. So if you think about it, in episode 4, A New Hope, Vader was mysterious, right? We didn't know his backstory.
Right.
We didn't know anything. So I think they were doing that with Kylo to an extent. But my biggest question, and even to this day, remember when Rey went down in the basement when she was at the cantina and she touched Anakin's lightsaber?
Yeah.
She had that vision where she was face to face with Kylo, and Kylo killed one of the Knights of Ren, right?
That's what it seemed
like. So
what
was that?
We don't know. That scene was never explained. And that's one of my biggest problems with this whole trilogy is there's so many questions that are left unanswered because of the conflict between the directors. You know, we have. Well, we're gonna jump into the plot of the movie here in just a second, but we have so many things that I noticed when I was watching this again. I was like, there's just another scene that was never answered ever.
See, initially I thought, oh snap, she was there at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and somehow she forgot about
Final
it, right?
Fantasy amnesia. Yeah.
Right, something like
That was a
that.
popular
So
theory.
yeah, so I was thinking when I was in the theater and I saw that, I was like, whoa, push pause. Let's. What happened here? What
Yeah.
just happened? You know, what message is this? What are they telling us?
What's
You
really
know?
sorry? What's really funny though is it seems like they kind of evolved that power over the movies. Like someone like Ryan Johnson like misinterpreted it, and that's how like her and Kylo are able to have conversations like across
Yeah,
time and space, right?
really weird.
The
Yeah, but
dyad
I think that
of the
stuff. I
Force.
think that is so cool. Like I think that is like
Yeah, I did too. I
such
didn't
a
have a
cool
problem
new
with that.
wrinkle to like the Jedi
Yeah.
powers and like their relationship with each other, and
It's
like
like
how someone good could have that connection to someone seemingly bad. Like I think that's really cool.
it's like a Force Zoom call, you know?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
But Coach, what rounding it out, what did you think about Kylo Ren? What's your impression of him in a vacuum in Episode 7?
I liked him because he was young,
Mm-hmm.
and we saw he had vulnerabilities. He was weak in some areas, so it was like he to me it seemed like he was trying to it was too soon for him to be where he is at, right?
Right.
Way too soon for him to be leading the the new world order, basically, right?
It's
So
such an anime thing, right? Where it's like, oh hey, here's this 16-year-old who's like the lead general of the emperor, like the shogun's army. It's just like, well, yeah,
Right.
he's 16, but he don't like he got the best grades in school. You don't get it. You know? Like,
and you got to remember though, in the original trilogy, Leia, it was Mon Mothma who was the leader of that, but Leia was the second, basically, in command, I think. And but she was trained from a child on diplomacy and all that stuff.
Right.
sure,
Right?
yeah, but and then also like I don't know. I'm trying to think of like the metaphors or like the implied commentary of this movie because like in episode 4 it was like a kid from a farm goes up against the big bad government. Like it's literally him and his young friends fighting old British people who are literally called Imperials who have a weapon that can destroy an entire planet in one thing. I'm just like, all right, so this is like a populist movie because like I believe that they didn't know that like Luke Skywalker was Darth Vader's kid when they filmed episode 4, right?
I agree.
And so at that point like he was literally just like a farmer from podunk middle of nowhere standing up. Like it was such like a populist message, you know, about how it's like no, it's like the little guy who can stand up to big bad government because this was I don't know, I guess 77, that was after Watergate, right? Or like
Oh yeah, it was after Watergate.
yeah, so it's just like, you know, a complete distrust of the government. So let's make a movie where we blow up the freaking government, you know? And so try to think of like that layer of like cause and effect from the real world into the Star Wars movies. I'm like
See,
trying
I
to think of
didn't.
it when I'm watching it.
I've never read that much into it because I actually don't think George Lucas meant for any metaphors really. I think George Lucas personally, this is going to sound sinful, kind of a hack. Because especially if you read into like the development of the original trilogy, his wife changed so much that made it the trilogy that it was. And a lot of people speculate that the reason he went back so much later into the prequels was after his really, really nasty divorce. And he was kind of like, look, I can do this on my own. And
That's
that's like
interesting. Yeah.
that's one of the theories about why he went back and changed so much and why he went back and the prequels were so much different than the original trilogy. And why a lot of the original trilogy writing is so, or the prequel trilogy writing is so bad was because I don't know if you guys have heard this before. He originally wanted the main characters of the movies to be C-3PO and R2-D2.
Well, that was like a direct ripoff of like the beginning of like Hidden Fortress, which was like the two like thieves or like bumbling farmer type
Yeah.
deal. You know, like they were like the original intro to like the world that Kurosawa was telling. Like that's what I meant by like this movie is just, or like at least the original trilogy is just like so derivative of everything else that it just synthesizes all these different ideas into one cohesive-ish thing, which I think is like
Yeah.
what makes it interesting. It's super like postmodern that way. And then I don't know if that makes the sequel trilogy, I don't know what comes after postmodern. Like it's almost like ironic or like meta
I would
textual.
say the
Like
sequel trilogy is extremely meta. Yeah,
and
I
like
think it
that's
is.
I think that's kind of frustrating to be completely honest.
Why do you say it's meta?
It just seems like it screams so much at the audience because it's like it's like episode 7 to me was like, you guys hated the prequels so much that we are going to give you exactly what you asked for,
Okay.
so that you can't, if you complain about it, your only complaint is this is exactly like the movie we love. And then episode 8 is so much the anti that.
Yeah.
And then episode 9 is like, oh, you guys hated that so much.
Oh, that was
We're
too
gonna,
different. Okay, cool. Well,
yeah,
don't worry. We're going to make sure everything is super familiar and
yeah,
recognizable. It's like, oh man, you know who's like, we don't want to make Kylo Ren the bad guy. Who's the best bad guy in Star Wars? Gotta be Sheev. Gotta be
yeah,
Sheev Palpatine.
Yeah.
Gotta go back to that well.
yeah.
You know, speaking about that, one thing that I did appreciate about episode 7 when I walked out of the theater, you remember during the early 2000s when all of this was happening, you had the prequels and then you had the Lord of the Rings trilogy, right?
Right.
So the Lord of the Rings trilogy, it wasn't all just green screen and blue screen.
Right.
I mean, they had natural environments. So that's what made it. And everything was still standard def back then, right? We didn't have high def.
Yeah.
So it looked amazing on screen, you know? And then when we go back to watch the prequels, we could see how everything was just, you know, green screen to the max. That's what I liked about episode 7 is of course there was, but it felt natural.
Right.
You know, they were in natural spaces in the desert. You know, Maz Kanata's place. You know, they were in when Rey got when Rey and Kylo first meet. It was in the jungle. You know, so it was a natural environment, and so I appreciated that.
Well, that
It wasn't Coruscant.
and like BB-8 was like a real thing, you know,
Yeah,
like it was like a thing
exactly.
that actually existed in the space.
Yeah.
And they were just like, crap, we got to figure out how to make like a ball work, which is awesome. It's so cool that they actually made it real.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, I noticed something, and I've never picked up on it before. When First Order leaves, Leia's little ship comes down, right?
Right.
And C-3PO walks out and he's like, "Oh, what's up, BB-8?" I mean, like he starts having a conversation with BB-8 like he knew him.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of strange, but yeah. But going back to BB-8, have you seen the making of for this movie?
I have not.
It is really cool how they did BB-8 because they had a guy in like a green, you know, the green screen suit, and it's like a lawnmower attachment kind of. And so he was running, and so that's how BB-8's running. It's really awesome.
That's
how they
really
did
funny.
It. Yeah, it is really awesome how they did it.
That's pretty awesome.
Like when they were in the sand running away from the TIE fighters that were shooting at him, right?
That's super cool.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really cool.
Yeah, so let's go into the actual movie, and I'm just gonna start going through the plot and.
Well, let's start with the first act.
Yes, that's where I'm gonna start from
Right.
the beginning. I'm just gonna start going through different things, and if you guys have something to say, just jump in. So the movie opening is the nighttime on Jakku, and the movie immediately starts out with Poe getting a part of the map to Luke Skywalker from an unknown older man who is, by the way, never explained in the movies. He's only explained in the Kylo Ren comics.
Yeah.
Who he is. He was actually a friend of Luke Skywalker's and Kylo Ren when he was younger. He went on the mission where Kylo became Kylo Ren.
But you know, I was okay with that because I knew that the two of them had a past.
Right.
I knew that man knew Kylo probably when he was in diapers, or
Right.
Ben, right? We'll call him Ben. So I knew that there was history there just because of the dialogue.
And I think the dialogue is so good in this opening scene between Kylo and I forget the guy's name, but when Kylo's like, "Look how old you've become," and he looks back and just snaps back and he goes, "Something far worse has happened to you."
Yeah,
That
so
is
good.
such a great the conversation between those two. You know, when he goes that I forget the exact quote, but he's like, I know where you come from. You know, I know who
Right.
you are." And then Kylo Ren just snaps and ices this dude, just chops him down mercilessly.
And this is nitpicking. They had him flinch too much.
You think so?
I
Well, I
wish he
mean,
would have.
if a lightsaber's coming towards my face, I feel like I might,
I just wanted him to be savage and just look him in the, well, not in the eyes because he had his mask on. Like, okay, go ahead and do it.
Yeah. So we're getting a little ahead of ourselves though, because after the scene with Poe and the old man, the First Order invades the village. We don't really know why they invade this village. Perhaps specifically for the map to Luke Skywalker.
No, we assume that like they were following Poe, don't we? Because it's like
I didn't get that.
that was the vibe I
No.
got because it was like right after Poe landed. Then
My
they showed up.
assumption is they got intel that the old man is at this colony. That's what I came away with.
But after Poe gets the map and the First Order invades, Poe actually tries to run away. I don't know if you guys noticed this or not. And he tries to get in his ship and just dip. But his ship is shot down. And his ship is non-functional. He gives the map to BB-8 and tells him to run. And then Poe goes back to fight to fight the First Order. And then in this conflict, we get what I think is an awesome scene of our first scene of Finn, who is FN 2187 at this point, and the bloody handprint that goes across his helmet. And he's the only stormtrooper there with the bloody handprint across his helmet. I think that's really, really cool. Not only does it allow you to keep track of him, see where he is in the scenes, it allows you to like be like, oh wow, this is pretty dark. Like this opening scene is probably one of the darker scenes we ever get in Star Wars, right up there with like, you know, the Master Skywalker, what are we to do?
Yeah.
You know?
That poor little crap.
Yeah. He's like, oh, my hero, Anakin Skywalker's here to save me.
Master Skywalker, what are we going to do? You just stupid little British idiot. Love
and
him.
then Kylo Ren walks out from the ship, and Poe Dameron immediately fires, and Kylo Ren just, like you said earlier, Coach, just alpha dogs him, just suspends the bullet, and captures Poe. And then they have a very brutal execution scene in the village where they just ball up the prisoners and they just fire. You know, they have the stormtroopers fire. And that's the first time we see Finn.
Yeah. Not that anyone in the First Order cares, but it was like it took us 8 minutes to get to our first war crime. Like,
right. Right. The interesting thing about Finn being unable to shoot is that when Kylo Ren's walking back to the ship, he feels it. And I think that's really interesting because it's almost as if Kylo Ren can just feel the emotions of everyone around him, which isn't something that I think we've really seen before. It seemed to, in my opinion, it was always that the Jedi were able to hone in on specific individuals, but it was almost in this point that Kylo Ren was able to feel everybody around him, which I thought was kind of interesting. But you guys have anything to say about the opening scene, or should we move on?
Yeah, like I said, this is my second favorite after Revenge of the Sith.
Okay.
I think it showed right away that Kylo Ren's got it, right? He's strong in the Force. And, even with Poe, there's that little comedic moment, like, who talks first here? You want me to talk? Do you talk?
See,
Yeah, that was pretty
You
funny.
know?
no, I actually hated that part because I think that the one of my bigger problems with the sequel trilogy is that their jokes sound exactly like MCU jokes. Like, just like tonally, it sounds like something that would
Yeah.
be in a Marvel movie, and that's just, I'm like, come on, guys, like, you're like like,
Okay,
I'm
I
sure
see that.
they got like the same script doctors that are helping out, and like the Marvel movies are generally pretty good, and I think these
Mhm.
movies are generally pretty good, but like when you just have like the same voice across such different properties, that I'm just like, come on, guys, do a little bit
Yeah.
better. Gets
I can see
even
that.
worse in Episode 8. I hate that.
Yes.
I hate
The
that
beginning of
opening.
episode 8. Yeah.
I hate that scene so much.
Which
Yeah.
one?
Like when he's like the prank phone call that like Poe does in the beginning.
Oh yeah, that was like lame. I mean,
was-
we'll get to that whenever we do it again.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like the lamest thing I've seen in Star Wars almost.
Yeah.
Jeez. That's saying a lot. So, yeah, Kylo Ren takes Poe back to get interrogated. Then we get
But we also, don't forget, we also see Captain Phasma for the first time too.
we do see Captain Phasma.
What a waste.
That's what I was about to say. The biggest
Amen.
waste of any character in Star Wars, I think.
Well, we
The
said
big-
that at first about Boba, remember? Because like Boba didn't get a lot of screen time, so there was almost similarities as far as
That's really cool, man. So 30 years from now, we'll get like a really good Captain Phasma show.
yeah.
It's pretty exciting. Back in
I don't
2051, she'll crawl out of whatever wreckage she's in.
Right.
I do not understand what they were doing with Phasma because she just keeps coming back, and I don't think anyone cared about Captain Phasma.
It's also
And-
weird because like I love Gwendolyn Christie. Like she was
Right.
awesome on Game of Thrones.
Absolutely.
And so it's just like, one, why would you put her in this outfit and like cover up like her face? Because like I think she like does like facial expressions so well. Like she did sad on Game of Thrones like perfectly.
right.
And so it's like, all right, so you want to make her like a higher up? That's cool. That's cool. That's cool. What does she like really do? It's like, oh, nothing. She like literally nothing except
Just gets beat up.
yeah, files a TPS report about the war crime they just committed on Jakku against a bunch of like
Yeah.
old nomads, and then
And she
gets
was
shoved
trained
into a
how to-
trash can later. You know,
Right.
Right.
She was trained how to disarm the defense shields of the whole.
Oh
planet.
yeah, later on.
Jesus. Yeah.
So then the movie cuts to the Star Destroyer, where the First Order fleet is coming from, and that's where we get Finn's first look at Finn's face. Like you said, Coach, he takes his helmet off, has the panic attack. Phasma again immediately jumps in to stop any sort of character development from going on at that scene. And, saying, "Who told you to take your helmet off and place your blaster in for inspection, and then meet me in my office." That's pretty much all we get until we cut back to Jakku, and this is actually the first scene we get of Rey. And I think this scene is absolutely stunning, where we see her scavenging, and then she, zip lines down, and it ends up that this is a giant old Star Destroyer that she's in, and she's just in the exhaust port of the Star Destroyer, and then she slides down the hill. I think that's such a cool scene.
Also, again, talk about metaphors, man. It's like literally a new character just like raiding the past, trying to take the best parts of something very familiar to the audience and just taking it, and then going to sell it. Like,
Yeah.
sorry, I smoke a lot of weed and drink a lot of scotch, and I was a film major, so it's really hard for me to like turn this off. I think I'd enjoy movies more if I could, but like it's so hard to like watch this and be like, that's a little on the nose, my dudes. Like,
So, but that there's a lot of backstory with that Star Destroyer, because that crashed during the Battle of Jakku, which I want to say is 3 to 4 years after Return of the Jedi.
this is
So,
a discussion we were having the other day. If it doesn't happen in the movie, I don't know if it
right.
counts.
But I'm just saying there's a backstory on that entire, and so I just wish they would have gone more into detail about that somehow, some way. I mean, I don't see how they could have fit that in there, but it was a cool backdrop, right?
Well, see, I don't know. I kind of liked it because I always just kind of assumed there was other battles we never saw.
Right.
I never assumed that, okay, you blew up 2 spaceships of the Empire, but this is a galaxy-wide empire. There's obviously way more fighting to go on. So I just assumed that Jakku was another battlefield where the fighting happened. And by the way, before I
It was
move
in
on,
Battlefront 2, by the way.
I know, and I'm playing through that story
Yeah.
right now, and I haven't gotten there yet. Before I move on, I do want to say that I think the world in Episode 7, over the whole sequel trilogy, is really confusing because the opening crawl says that it's a time for the Republic, right? But then the First Order has crept up from the Outer Rim or something. But it doesn't seem like that. First off, there's the Republic, and then there's the Rebellion and the Resistance.
It's so yeah.
It seems like
that is so confusing.
Yeah, I don't understand because like it wouldn't be a Resistance or Rebellion if it was part of the Republic, who is the main government force in the galaxy right now. But the movie isn't framed like that. It's framed like the First Order has control of the galaxy, and the Republic is still like Episode 4, 5, and 6 Republic. It's very strange, and they never explain it. Well, they don't need to after this movie, but
So if you watch, it was very hard to watch, but I did. But the cartoon Star Wars Resistance, you see how people that are in the Republic look down at the Resistance.
That doesn't make any sense. It's their standing army.
Right. So
wait, I thought it wasn't their standing army. I thought it was like they don't have an army because they beat the Empire, and then this is like a little outfit that was like gathering arms to fight off the First Order.
I think it's more like that because one of the main characters in the show, his name is Kaz. His dad, or he was actually in the basically the Air Force for the whatchamacallit, not the Rebellion, but no, not the Resistance, but the Republic. He was a Republic officer, and then he ended up being with the Resistance or working with the Resistance. So it's really confusing how it is, but just know that the Resistance is like, they're just, wannabe soldiers, basically.
Well, they could have used them when their whole planet system got bombed.
Right.
So Rey then takes the power coupling or whatever to this guy who appears to just be like a junk trader on Jakku.
Do you know who played that guy?
No, I didn't. Who is that?
It's the one guy that was
Simon Pegg, man. Yeah.
What? Yes.
I didn't know that.
50 portions.
Yeah.
He's a hardcore Star Wars fan, so I think he asked to be on there. So
yeah, he gave her the 1/4 portion, and then we get, in my opinion, a lot of character development for Rey when she takes it back and does her little bread thing with the water, and she's sitting there eating it outside of an old AT-AT. And she puts on the Rebellion helmet, the old Rebellion helmet that she found, and you can tell she just like looks up to, that exact helmet. And you can tell she just kind of like looks up to the past. I think there's also like a Luke Skywalker or an X-wing pilot.
There's a pilot doll.
Yeah, and you can tell she just like looks up to these almost legends that she had heard about this battle on Jakku. And I thought that was pretty cool because like, there's the giant wall, of course, of all the scratches. And you can tell she's just like this lonely girl who has spent a lot of time doing absolutely nothing.
She likes Star Wars as much as we do, but
exactly.
like the concept of Star Wars as much as we do.
Exactly. And then while she's having her quarter portion, she meets BB-8, who's getting captured, and this is really our first real introduction with BB-8 outside the opening scene. And we really get to get like good eyes on him and get to see like this droid actually has a lot of character to him. And I think he's probably my personal favorite droid out of Star Wars now. I think BB-8 is like a really cool little kickball.
A lot of personality, and I like his personality. Like C-3PO has a lot of personality. I don't really care for 3PO's personality.
Right.
R2-D2
office dork.
Yeah, R2-D2 is fine. Like I liked him more before the prequels. I'll say that.
The thing I like about R2-D2 is his scream.
That's so good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. And then the scene after Rey, of course, saves BB-8, and then she takes him along with her. There's this really cute scene where BB-8 just like kind of wants to follow her, and he's like a lost puppy, and she's finally like, all right, come on, like you're out. I guess you are kind of cute. Then the movie cuts back to the Star Destroyer with Kylo interrogating Poe, and Kylo doing his like force interrogation thing, which is another one of those abilities that we talked about before that we haven't really seen before this. He kind of like does some sort of like mind reading ability on Poe, which I think is kind of cool. But then Kylo dips out, Finn comes in, and they just decide, we're getting out of here. Finn's like, I'm a turncoat now, I guess. No plan at all. Just gonna steal a TIE fighter and fly out of here.
What'd you guys think of that whole moment where he's just like, why are you doing this? He's like, because it's the right thing to do.
It seemed a little, I don't know. I don't like that line because it seems to go against Finn's character, which, my opinion, at this point, Finn's just more like, I absolutely hate this place.
Yeah, I hate my job so much. I need to quit my job.
Yeah. That's kind of where I got. I didn't get that Finn was this honor-bound guy at this point.
Yeah, but I think that was in there because, like, as an audience member who has like engaged with Star Wars before, just like you're watching this, you're just like, oh well, this guy, like, he's clearly gonna do the right thing, like he's gonna be the hero, and you're just like, oh no, like he's just open a bag out early, man, like he just wants to clock out early and like have a 3-day weekend.
Yeah.
He went AWOL.
I did write down that immediately Poe and Finn have great chemistry.
Yeah.
Just those two together, they could have carried the sequel trilogy on their own, I think.
Well, the whole escape scene was awesome, right?
Yeah. Yep. And I think it's really cool that they were trying to get in the TIE fighter and fly away, but they weren't prepared for like the cable attachment. And they were just stuck there, and they're like, what do we do now? But I thought it was pretty cool. And then we have a scene that cuts to Kylo Ren and Hux, General Hux, and it's almost a direct mirror to Darth Vader and Grand Moff Tarkin, because Grand Moff Tarkin outranked Vader in the Empire, and Hux also outranks Kylo Ren in the Empire. And Kylo Ren says, like, I think it's this scene where he has like a funny comment, like, oh, maybe we should have a clone army come take the place of the stormtroopers, which I thought was a nice little funny callback.
I love that dude too. Is it Dominic Monaghan? Is it not? No, not Dominic. That's the guy. That's Mary from Star. Domhnall Gleeson. Sorry.
Yeah.
Love that dude. Like, I just think he's a really good actor. He's in this one movie called About Time, which I think is like incredible. But I also really just like his character in this movie, and then I hate him in episode 8. Some liberties were taken with him in episode 8. But in this movie, I think he does a really good job. And like, one thing I actually kind of like about this movie is that like they really reinforce that, like, like we're very much in the shadow of the Empire, and they just made him seem like super space Nazis. Like, it was always implied before, but like they really just beat you over the head with it in this movie. Like when he gives that speech on whatever the planet's called, Starkiller Base. Yeah, but isn't it the planet Ilum? Like, isn't that?
It's implied. It's never explicitly said that it's Ilum, but it's implied that it's Ilum.
Okay. Like that was straight up like Hitler just like banging the podium, like giving like his like Crystal Notch speech, like it was is absolutely insane how literal they made that interpretation. And
he pulls it off absolutely incredibly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Coach, what did you think of the escape scene from the Star Destroyer?
I liked it because it was a new variant of the TIE fighter. Mm-hmm. It had a new color scheme with it. So I really liked that. And it was any space scenes like that I love. I get geeked out. And that's why I enjoyed Resistance, because they would always have a little like some type of space scene like that, Mm-hmm. So I mean, even going back to episode 4, the trench run, that's what has hooked me, and that's my thing when it comes to Star Wars are the space battles. So the one in Rogue One is amazing.
Yeah,
You
perfect.
know, yeah. So I really liked it. It was short and sweet and to the point, and then it cuts. And the next scene is just amazing when the sand swallows up the TIE fighter.
Also, it is a really small point, but I love that Poe. He has this line where it's just like, "Oh man, it's the new model. I've always wanted to fly this." Like he
Yeah.
actually like says some line like that. And you're just like, "Huh?" Like, okay, that makes me feel less guilty for like always thinking like, "Man, yeah, they're space Nazis, but they got a really cool aesthetic. Like, I really like the way the TIE Interceptor looks. Like, I don't know what that says about me and my personal philosophies. I don't think I'm a Nazi, but I really want to fly a TIE Interceptor and a TIE bomber. That stuff looks cool."
Right.
And so him admitting that, I felt like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm allowed to think that too without feeling bad.
But on their way, I love the fact that Poe's like, we're going back to Jakku. And Finn's like, why are we going? Why does everyone want to go back to Jakku? He's like, we can't go back to Jakku because, and Poe's like, there's this droid down there. And Finn's like, why are we going back for a droid? We're getting shot at. But then they obviously crash. Poe's nowhere to be found. Finn takes the jacket, which I thought was cool.
Yeah.
And heads into Rey's village. And then once he's in the village,
nobody's giving him water.
No one's giving him water. He finds the water, of course. Then he sees Rey being attacked. And then BB-8 recognizes the jacket. He gets in a conflict with Rey. And then I have right here that the First Order starts bombing the town for absolutely no reason. Because in the scene before that, Kylo Ren and Hux had a conversation about capturing the droid alive. They wanted the information from BB-8. But then that it's conflicted in the scene with Jakku because they're just having a conversation and the First Order flies in and just starts blasting everything. And it's like, okay, well.
Well, remember, they called it in. I think the stormtroopers called it in.
Well, they called it in, but before they call it in, the fighters come down and just start shooting the town. And then they call in, he hears the bombers coming in, and then they start exploding. Right. But I love the next scene when they're running, and you can and Finn grabs Rey. Finn keeps grabbing Rey's hand because I thought it was so interesting. Finn thinks he's the hero here, and Finn's like, "Oh, I'm the guy that turned on the First Order. I'm the trained stormtrooper. Here's this and I'm the hero. Here's this pretty girl, and she's gonna like me because I'm the cool hero guy." So he's constantly trying to save Rey, and Rey doesn't need any saving. We find out later, Rey is fully capable of defending herself and flying, and Rey is the one that ends up saving Finn. And Finn never drops the cool act until way later on in the movie, But he thinks he's the hero, and he just constantly is trying to impress Rey with that hero mentality.
I think that's super funny because the impression you got from the trailer. Do you guys remember when the trailer dropped?
I didn't watch the trailers.
I remember
I didn't want to be spoiled.
Man, there was one scene where I'm pretty sure we saw eventually not the teaser trailer, but then the eventual trailer, there was a really emphatic scene where Finn was the one with the lightsaber, and it was taken from that final fight. But it was pretty heavily implied that he was going to be the new generation Jedi person.
Yeah.
And so the fact that in the early movie it's him entirely trying to save Rey and her just being dude, fuck off. I do not need the hand right now.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's hilarious. I think that's super smart and really, really good subverted expectations just because we thought he was going to be the hero. We thought he was the dude,
And I think that him trying to save Rey is really funny, especially because the next scene when he's yo, there's a ship over there, and she's like, that's a piece of junk. And then the ship they're running to gets bombed, and she's like, oh, the piece of junk will do. And it's the Millennium Falcon.
It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, that was a good amazing moment.
Yeah.
And you're yes, there it is.
Yeah. That's the ship we know and love. And I do have a problem with the Rey piloting the Falcon scene that comes next, because obviously there's the dogfight, but like we hadn't really gotten any information about Rey being any sort of like pilot at this point. And then after the dogfight, Rey's even like, I don't know how I did that.
I don't care.
Yeah.
Like that's like one point that like really bothers me, that everyone brings up, that like, oh, she's like a total Mary Sue. Like she's just like too perfect and too good at everything. There's no room for character development. And I'm just like, dude, like Anakin was a 7-year-old pod racer. Like I'm not gonna draw the line, for her being like a good pilot. Like, especially like I feel like more so than any other Star Wars film, I feel like the sequel trilogy really takes a lot of shortcuts and just uses like archetypes, because we've had so much text of Star Wars. Like we've got the movies, 6 movies thrown at us, and we've all seen those movies multiple times. We've had a lot of TV shows, a lot of comics, a lot of video games. Like people have engaged with Star Wars on different levels. And so like there's just archetypes that you, as someone who is engaged with this material enough times, knows and understands. Not to mention just the language of movies, which we all generally speak pretty well now, just with the amount of visual content we consume. So I have like no problem just like, oh, she's super powerful, because like even she can't believe she couldn't do this. Like that was all I read into it. I wasn't personally like annoyed that she was so good at this. Like I don't need to see someone struggle and overcome that to understand they're powerful. Like I'm okay with just seeing them be powerful. And like the same way we saw Anakin be super powerful as a second grader,
Yeah, but he still had a lot of issues, like he got his ass handed to him the first time he went up against Dooku. Like he didn't even last like 30 seconds, it was swinging a couple swords and then whacked his arm and then.
Yeah, but also, I didn't need that, Like, I'm not saying, like, I need to see him struggle to believe that he's fighting against someone tough. Like, I could believe at face value, like, oh, he beat him, but, like, that was still, like, a tough battle,
So I think my biggest problem, though, and like I said, I love the character of Rey, but I have problems with her character because she never faces adversity. Or she faces it and just overcomes it. She never fails. If you think about, like, Luke Skywalker is a total Mary Sue, right? Has all the same issues you could say to Rey. He's like 16 or whatever it is, gets a lightsaber, and then in the next movie he's fighting Darth Vader and being okay and holding his own. And then the movie after that, he takes down an entire empire. But the thing with Luke Skywalker is that he made bad decisions and he also failed. And we see that constantly with his character. With Rey, I could forgive the Millennium Falcon. I could forgive her holding her own against Kylo Ren, because it's pretty heavily implied that Chewie's boat throughout the movie. By the way,
yeah, we're gonna talk about that. That was like my Reddit thing that I'm like, in hindsight that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, the bowcaster. But it's like the other stuff that actually breaks down the whole world of Star Wars, the whole galaxy of Star Wars, whatever you want to call it, because Rey, if taken at face value and taken literally, would be the most potent Force user I think we've ever seen. With zero training, zero experience, she's just able to see a power and then do it. And in fact, I wrote down later on, when she escapes her restraints, she's never even seen anyone at this point use Force Persuade. She just does it.
Yeah.
And
I saw that too, and I'm like, come on, you can't do that. That is
yes.
That was a party foul. That was a big party foul in the middle. Yeah. And
That's
you know who played that stormtrooper?
Yeah, James Bond.
Yeah.
Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
Daniel Craig.
Worst James Bond, by the way. But
I don't know that. Sorry, can you? I'm sorry, I was a little distracted. I'm thinking about something. Can you repeat just like the specific, like the thesis of like what your issue was with that?
My issue. So we talked about the Millennium Falcon and how I had a problem with Rey just piloting the Millennium Falcon like she's done it her whole life, and I said I could forgive that, and I could forgive the fight with Kylo at the end, but it is the fact that if taken at literal and face value, the other things that she does with the Force, she would be the most powerful and potent Force user we've ever seen. Because untrained, she is able to not only counter Kylo Ren, who is the grandson of Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, she's also able to use Force Persuade without ever seeing it or ever being trained to use the Force.
She saw it because Kylo tried to use it on her and couldn't.
No, that wasn't Force Persuade. That was more like, I'm going to
that
dip into
was
your
like,
mind.
okay, you're right.
Yeah,
okay.
that was his interrogation.
But I guess, I don't know, but like that's another thing where it's like archetypes where I'm just like, okay, maybe at this point she thinks like the Force or like this issue, like she could do more than just physical stuff with it. Because like, I don't know, I have to assume there's no way like that, this doesn't count because I didn't show it in the movies, but like there's no way that she didn't have like, you know, like a moment where she jumped super duper high and she's like, huh, that's weird that I could jump that high, you know, like something
Did she?
like that.
Because
But
I thought
no,
it
didn't happen on screen, so it doesn't count,
right?
you know.
Well, no, but I thought it was pretty heavily implied that that meeting in the interrogation room with Kylo Ren was the first time she's ever experienced or used the Force. That's kind of what it seemed like, because like you just see her kind of like start to fight back, and all of a sudden she's overcoming and taking Kylo Ren.
Well, and then he made, and this is watching it last night. I'm glad you brought that up. When he was telling his stormtroopers, he's like, find her now. Because the longer she is on her own, the more stronger she gets. Is that how the Force works? That just by hiding out, and as the stopwatch continues, as time goes, that she just magically gets better? Because that's what he was implying. And I was like, that's not how it works.
The Force is so stupid, though, and I feel like they rewrite the rules all the time. Like, wasn't, like, the explanation, like, the reason that Yoda couldn't figure out that, like, Palpatine was the Sith Lord is because Palpatine cut the Jedi off from the Force? Like, wasn't that, like, literally the entire explanation for, like the whole, like, Clark Kent effect? Like, why no one can tell that, like, oh, Clark Kent is Superman. It's like, no, he's not. Like, Clark Kent wears glasses. Like, that's impossible. Like,
yeah, Palpatine was using, like, some sort of, like he was clouding their vision on purpose.
All right, but, like, I'm saying, like, that's, like, a BS thing that, like, I don't think that existed in the original trilogy. So doesn't that change the rules of everything we're established? And then, like, I have no problem with that stuff just because, I don't know, like, I think the second you, like, clearly define the Force, I think that's when it becomes not fun. You know?
Yeah, I just think that her being able to do everything that she wants at any point in time removes the necessity for her to go to Luke Skywalker to train. And it also makes the previous entries of the Jedi training seem like nonsense. Like, if we take this, like I said, at literal face value, Anakin Skywalker never needed the Jedi. And like that's what I was saying in the beginning, that I think the sequel trilogy defies and breaks the rules down of Star Wars.
He didn't need it. I'm pretty sure the Jedi, like, ruined his life. So, yeah.
You could argue that. But then, yeah, so after Kylo Ren finds out BB-8 escaped, he has his first meltdown. And that's the first time we see Kylo Ren's, like, character start to break down, and you start to realize, like, oh, this isn't like a Darth Vader character. He's like this young, bratty kid, like we talked about earlier. And then after that, we see the great scene of the pipe exploding in the Millennium Falcon, Rey going down to fix it, and Finn scrambling with BB-8 to get him to tell Rey where, like, their resistance base is.
Yeah.
He's like, yo, listen, I'm just trying to escape.
Bro,
I need some help here.
Also, she's kind of cute. Don't screw this up for me.
Like, yeah.
Right. Because he asked her, you got family? You got a boyfriend?
Yeah.
And BB-8 does the really cute thing with the lighter where he sticks the lighter out and gives the thumbs up. I thought that was, like, really cool.
That killed my movie theater. Like, everyone was just like,
yeah.
Aww! Like, that just, everyone was so into that part. And, like, I at that point, I was, like, really in, man. I was just like, yeah, dude, they figured it out. They cracked the code for how you make a new Star Wars movie in 2015. Yes. They nailed it.
Yes, I love that scene. I think that's an awesome scene. And then the scene directly after that is another amazing scene where Han comes
And
back into the
Chewie,
Falcon. Yeah, Han and Chewie come back in the Falcon. It's like, Chewie, we're home, and I'm like, oh, they nailed it.
and you
You know,
see, and that is something they needed more of. That is those moments where you have that, right?
right?
The what we saw in the original trilogy. My biggest complaint against this movie is we did not get the original triplets together. We didn't get them together. Luke, Han, and Leia were not in a scene together. If they would have done that at the end, granted, if and we'll get to Han Solo in a bit and what happens with Kylo, but if they had Leia and Han, Rey, um, Chewie, and I guess R2, if all of them would have gone down to that first Jedi temple where Luke was, that would have made the movie a 10 out of 10 because we would have saw all three of them together. And J.J. Abrams he failed big time on that. And this movie needed that.
So I
This movie
think
needed that.
the
I could
original,
I could not disagree more.
well, the original plan was to have Luke Skywalker in the middle of the movie and have a larger role in the movie. And what they said was anytime Luke Skywalker comes into the movie immediately becomes about him because he's such a legendary character. And I actually kind of agree with them. A lot of people were mad that Luke died in episode 8. And I was mad with the fact that he died before doing anything important. But I was not mad that he died because I think Luke Skywalker had to die. It's
Yeah.
my biggest problem with DC Comics is that Superman is always there. If Luke Skywalker hadn't died and had redeemed himself, the last movie probably would have just been a Luke Skywalker versus Snoke movie, or Luke Skywalker versus whoever the bad guy is.
But see, I was okay with just having Luke at the end. I'm not saying we needed more Luke. I'm just saying that
Together.
we needed one shot with all three of them together. Like that feeling we got when we saw Luke Chewie and Han walk into that feeling that you got inside. Like, yeah, here we go. We're home, baby.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We didn't get that with all three of them.
I disagree. I think the original cast was probably in this new trilogy too much.
Interesting. Too much.
Yeah. Well, it's just one of those things like, all right, forget for a second that Kurt Cobain died, right?
Okay.
The singer for Nirvana. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like they would have played a Super Bowl in like 2014, and they would have been just like 55 years old talking about smelling like Teen Spirit. And it's like, dude, is that really what you want? Like, do you want to see old, haggard Dave Grohl and Kurt Cobain talking about Smells Like Teen Spirit when like they got fucking wrinkles? Like, do you want that? Like, no, man, no one wants that. Like, Jimi Hendrix died at like what?
I would love
Jimi Hendrix died at 27, man. Like, he would have been 90 going on stage playing at the Super Bowl. Like he would have joined the Who for their show. Like, come on, man. Like, I got to move on and just like cut the cord at some point. Like,
well, so I think their inclusion is necessary because it's a generational thing. Like,
yeah, it's passing off the torch. Yeah, the baton.
Yes.
Yeah, I get that. But also, like, Star Wars, I don't think is any one character. I think it is a feeling. I think it is a feeling you get when you watch these movies doing things that seem so futuristic and high tech, but like has such an old school nature to it. Like, I think that marriage of those two things is like what makes Star Wars really special to me. And so, like, it's a feeling. It's not a person. And so it's just like,
right.
Commit
and
to
I get
it.
that. I get that, George. But remember, this is still the Skywalker saga.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, if you have them in too much, like in our next movie, then we had Leia too much. But anyways, if we would have just had that one scene where I guess all four of them, to include Chewie, that would have been icing on the cake for me.
Sure.
Just that one point where they're like, Luke, and he would have saw him and he'd break down and or whatever.
See, to me, I don't think you can have too much Chewbacca because there's no generational next for Chewbacca, and he's sort of like a droid where like you don't really ever know exactly what Chewbacca's saying. You can only read Chewbacca through the other characters that understand him. But like I said, I think you had to be really careful with what you did with Luke Skywalker, because if you wanted these movies to be about a new cast, bringing Luke Skywalker in and making him Episode 6 super powerful Jedi Master Luke Skywalker immediately makes him the hero. And I think Episode 8 failed with their portrayal of Luke, but I think having him at the end, and I understand what you're saying too, I think it would have been good to have at least one shot of the whole cast together. And I also agree with you that we do see too much Leia in the sequel trilogy. Not in this movie. I think she did it all right in this movie, and I think she was shot well in this movie because you can tell that her acting skill is sort of lacking at this point in her life. She hasn't really done a whole lot, and I think her acting wasn't great, but they shot her in such a way that you couldn't really tell, and it didn't intrude too much on the movie, I thought.
Sure. Yeah, they didn't ask her to do a lot, which I think was good.
She hits the important notes: the reunion with Han Solo and the motherly instinct with Rey. I think is important.
Yeah.
But let's move on. Sorry, okay. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead. So you say.
One of my biggest gripes is the fact that Han and Leia were divorced, or I don't know if they were divorced, but they were separated.
Well, we'll get there because I have
yeah, we got a lot of scenes to cover still.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So I want to move.
Jumping on Leia. But...
I want to fast forward a little bit because we get Han Solo. We get him meeting the crew and telling them that I knew Luke and the Force is real, all of it, and he had this student that betrayed everybody. He doesn't really go into deep detail that he knows exactly what was going on.
Metaphor.
And he's very well. My thing with Han Solo is he has a very father-daughter dynamic towards Rey.
Yes.
Which led a lot of people to believe when this movie came out that Rey was Kylo's sister and that they were protecting her for some reason, which I never bought into because I thought that was really weird. Why Han Solo and Leia would, it didn't make any sense.
It's also they're bad parents if they lament one child and just completely ignore the other one. They're better people than that.
They're bad parents.
I was thinking that she was more of a niece to them.
Yeah.
So she knew they knew who she was, but they didn't want to come out and say it right away.
You said something about bad parents, George. I think Han and Leia are bad parents no matter what. If you take the whole sequel trilogy story into account, they gave up on Kylo Ren immediately.
Yeah, they dropped several balls throughout the 3 movies for sure.
Leia's like, I'm a trained Jedi. I'm gonna send my son off with my brother and leave him alone. And then she somehow hears that Ben Solo turned to the dark side, and she's like, "Well, I guess that sucks." Okay. But then we get a really cool scene with Han Solo and Finn when they first land on Maz Kanata's planet, where I think it's so cool when Han Solo's like, "Listen, big deal. You got another problem."
Well, at first Finn calls him Solo.
Yeah, he's like, Solo?
And Han's like, Solo? You just call me, yeah.
Yeah, he's like, women always find out the truth. And I thought that was such an awesome scene because you knew Han immediately was like, I've seen enough war heroes in my time to know that this guy is not one of them.
Also, you get the feeling he's definitely banged his way across the galaxy enough to know. He's like, yeah, dude, it will catch up with you. Trust me.
Yeah.
Before we move on too far, I just want to say Kanji Club is such a cool name for a space gang.
Yes, it is.
I love the name Kanji Club.
Because I kind of jumped over that scene because it doesn't really matter in the grand plot, but it does introduce Han's character. But that is a great scene when Han's like, I always talk my way out of it. And you can see Chewie protest, and then the Kanji Club shows up, and he's like, good to see you. He's stuck. I think it's a great scene.
It goes back to, you remember when he was talking to Yoda in episode 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they originally wanted that in there, and they had the actor pretend to be not Yoda,
Jabba.
but Jabba. Yeah,
right,
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was back to his old scavenger skills, right?
Yeah,
Like
scoundrel. Yeah.
yeah, his scoundrel skills. Yeah, sorry.
No,
So
it was so good, and that line to Finn is incredible. Yeah.
Oh yeah, listen, big deal. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. But before we move on to Maz Kanata's cantina, we get a really good scene with Snoke talking to Hux and Kylo Ren, which kind of moves the overall plot forward. Where Hux is talking about finally using Starkiller Base, blowing up the whole Republic, and then Snoke tells Kylo what would be in the trailer over and over and over again. There has been an awakening. Have you felt it? Again, I think referring to Rey, but also not expanded upon enough to make sense. I don't think. I think what they were going for was Rey is someone special. She's finally achieved heroism or something, because Rey hasn't really done anything at this point. But Snoke does say there has been an awakening. Have you felt it? He gives that line to Kylo.
It's just like in Harry Potter, when Harry Potter makes the glass disappear, like in the zoo or whatever, and
Yeah.
that's when he gets the letter from Hogwarts being like, "Hey, we know you did this magic. You don't do that. But also come to our school. Like it's time to learn."
Yeah, I found it weird that because Rey hasn't used any not that we know of any Force abilities at this point.
Well, has she been well, yeah, she did, because remember, she blocked Kylo Ren from getting into her mind.
She hasn't met Kylo Ren yet.
Not at this point. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, my bad.
No, she hasn't met Kylo Ren yet.
Yeah.
But either way, I guess it is what it is. And then they go to Maz Kanata's planet, which I think is also like I'm telling you guys, the first half of this movie didn't miss a beat. Like Maz Kanata's planet was so cool, and I love Maz Kanata's character. She's got the glasses that she zooms in and out on. I love that character.
Where's my boyfriend? Yeah. That's so good.
I like that Wookiee. That is such a likable, good character. But before we actually get there, Han gives Rey a blaster, and he offers her a job, and Rey is super insistent on going back to Jakku to her family, and I think this was one of those first scenes where it's there's something odd with Rey. She needs to get back to Jakku. I think that was a foreshadowing of J.J. Abrams' original story. Why is Rey trying to get back to Jakku so badly, and why would she turn down a job to get off that desert rock?
Yeah, with the legend Han Solo himself. The general? No, the smuggler. Yeah, it's so good.
And that was the first scene to me, because I think this Maz Kanata, I don't know the name of the planet, but this planet's scenes are very foreshadowing, and they're extremely important to the plot, because obviously this is where Rey later finds the lightsaber. But obviously Rey turns down Han Solo, and they move on to the bar, where one of the patrons immediately recognized them. We already talked about Maz Kanata, talking about Chewbacca, but she tells Han that she's not going to help them, and that Han needs to go see Leia himself. She says, it's been far too long. You've been avoiding this fight, which leads us to believe that Han left when Kylo turned to the dark side, and it's that was my biggest problem with Han and Leia's writing, is that really, you guys just
gave up.
Yeah, you guys oh well, Ben turned to the dark side, and I guess that's that. I don't know, it's really weird.
It's so weird though, because it's just okay, let's I don't have children, but it's I don't know, what if your kid just killed so many people and then joined a militia where he killed so many more people? I don't know if you'd consider that kid dead to you. I don't have a child.
You never would, and you would a parent would always fight for them to try and get them back.
But especially, and this is because we see a scene around this time of Kylo talking to Vader through the helmet, and I wrote down specifically here, did no one tell him that Vader went back to the light side at the end of his life? and like had a redemption and like didn't die as Darth Vader. He died as Anakin. That was Anakin and Darth Vader's whole character arc, right? Was that he
Yeah.
was redeemed at the end of his life. And I guess Luke was just like, he didn't tell him that story. I don't know. It's never expanded upon.
I don't know, man. No one ever follows in Hitler's footsteps because they're like, you know what? I actually want to be a painter. Like, that's not like the part that they talk about. You know, like
True.
it's like also he was good for like 5 minutes. I'm sorry. Like it was.
I agree.
It was such a weak ass. Like technically redeemed, but that is like repenting at the last second and getting into heaven. You know,
Yeah,
like,
it's like a mass murderer, like seeing a priest right before he gets executed.
yeah,
I
like,
understand.
so
what
we're
saying.
good, right? Like we're good. Like,
Yeah. It's just it is weird to me that like because he specifically calls him grandfather. You could tell he's trying to follow in Vader's footsteps, but he's like, I don't know if I feel the pull to the light again.
So this is what I thought about last night on that scene. That's where I think Snoke fed him lies, or in the end, now we know Palpatine fed him lies.
Yeah, that's fair.
Fed him lies about his grandfather.
Yeah. Which makes sense because Palpatine, I think later we see, was trying to take over his body or something like that.
Isn't that weird now that we watched that? We know that Palpatine, that was his spirit was in Snoke.
No, it just makes me sad. It makes me sad that like I watched this movie and I'm like, the potential that we had.
Definitely.
And that they just couldn't find a cadence or like agree upon something. I think it's very
I'm
unfortunate.
so excited to talk about episode 8 because I feel like episode 8 is probably the one you guys have the most problems with.
Yeah, it is.
Right? And like
just 2 parts of it. That's
like episode 9 is like a mess. Like plot wise, it is a mess, but it is at least like a fun movie where cool visual stuff happens.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited to talk about 8 about this stuff in particular.
I'm really excited about that too. Because I think like I said, the reason I wanted to do this was because we all have vastly different opinions, but we all know that we can have a sit down, open-minded and intellectual conversation about the criticism of these movies. And I think that's really interesting because you don't see that often when it comes to these Star Wars movies. It's always vitriol and anger.
Oh, God.
Well, it's so extreme one way or the other.
Yeah.
And so the fact that like I am like net positive, but it's not like, it's not like that great, but it is like net positive. Like it is a good opinion of the sequel trilogy. I think it is the second best. You're neutral, and the fact that Coach, like you're more negative, I think is just like super interesting. But I think it's because we're all so like tenuously where we are that we're able to do it. We're like, I totally understand why someone doesn't like it. I totally understand why someone's completely ambivalent to it. Like I understand your positions perfectly well.
And I think that's important. That's why I wanted to have this because I feel like no one gets to talk about this like this, But let's move on because I feel like we are slowly crawling through the plot of the movie. Maz Kanata does her like amazing scene to Finn where she opens her eyes and she's like, "You're not who you say you are,"
and then Finn got offended. You don't know who I am. You don't know what I've been. You don't know what I've seen.
What's she do in Solo? Yeah, that was great. She said she's been around. She's been around for a long time, and she's seen the same eyes in a lot of people. And I thought that was a great scene because, not only was like a metaphor in my opinion for him being a stormtrooper and seeing the same eyes in like a lot of people, but also she says he's running from something, and it's so obvious because he's like a terrible liar in this movie. Like he's like the worst liar of all time. And then she like reluctantly gives him a way out. And then this is where the really important scene that we were talking about earlier is where Finn and Rey get up from the table and leave. Maz looks at Han Solo and says like, "So who's the girl?" And right before Han can answer, that scene it cuts over to Finn again.
And that, I think, is J.J. Abrams' way of having us talk about this for the next 3 years until episode 8. That was his way of, that was his storytelling.
I agree, but I still think there was originally a plan for Rey. I still think she was supposed to originally be a Kenobi, and they scrapped that for whatever reason. Maybe Ryan Johnson didn't like it, or maybe Kathleen Kennedy didn't like it. Who knows? And I think at some point she was probably supposed to be Luke's daughter as well, because too much makes sense about these things.
Well, somehow the original script's going to come out, and we're going to read it, and we're all going to have a laugh.
Disney probably found every copy of those things and burned them immediately because they were like, we can't have this kind of thing get out. But then the scene where Finn finally tells Rey who he is comes out. He asks Rey to come with him, sort of like a proposal of, I took it like a romance type proposal, but I don't know. Rey obviously says no because, you know, she is the main character. But then Rey kind of feels what I took as like a pull almost, and starts exploring Maz Kanata's cantina.
Well, she heard the girl.
Yeah.
She heard her crying as a baby.
Yes. So there's a pull, which is interesting because it leads her right to Luke's lightsaber, and when she touches it, she has a vision. And I took this as a Force echo, which has been in the series before. That's in Jedi Fallen Order a lot, the Force echo abilities. But then when you analyze the scene, it can't be a Force echo because she has a vision of the future in it as well. And this is maybe the most important scene in the movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree it is. On a real quick, sorry, this podcast is obviously going to be super long. Like, I assume it's going to be like 2.5 hours just to cover everything. But it's a big movie with a lot of opinions. It will go smoother in the later episodes. But like in episode 5, like in Empire Strikes Back, when Luke goes into the cave and like takes a swing at that Darth Vader and like the head rolls off, a mask pops open and it's Luke. What do we think that was?
That I always thought that was the Force. The Force was really constant because it's specifically called the Force Cave, I think, in the literature.
Sure, but like, I'm not going on that. I'm just going by the movie. Like, I guess, no, I guess because like Force echoes aren't a thing in the movies. Like, I guess we do have to like bring in EU stuff and like extended stuff. But like, I don't know. Like, was that a vision? Was that like an actual like embodiment of the Force? Like, did he really take a swing at something that I assume then like dissipated? Like, what do we think happened there? And
well, I think that was
the equivalent of it.
I think that was a vision of Luke's fear of becoming Darth Vader, because we know originally George Lucas, the original scene for Return of the Jedi, which is awful, was Luke putting on the Vader helmet at the end of that movie and becoming the next Darth Vader. This was, and when you take that into context, I think this was Luke's maybe dark side and him afraid of that
self-doubt. Yeah.
I don't know.
And so, but like, is this Force Awakens equivalent of that, or is it something different?
I think it's something different.
Okay.
Because I wrote down all the things that happen in this scene. It opens up with, you can hear once again, young Rey screaming no. And then you get a quote from Yoda about the Force. Its energy surrounds us, binds us. And then you get the vision of Luke screaming no, and Luke and R2-D2 at what we assume is the ruined Jedi Temple with him touching R2-D2. And then we get Kylo and the Knights of Ren with like 100 dead bodies around them. And that's what Coach was talking about earlier. Someone gets stabbed. We assumed it was a Knight of Ren. It's never implicitly said. And then she has another flash of her parents leaving. And then what the really interesting thing that I thought when I watched this again was she has an exact vision of the upcoming battle with Kylo, of the future. And then she hears Obi-Wan say, Rey, these are your first steps. So.
Did Obi-Wan say that at any point?
No.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he says these are your first steps into a deeper world. Like, he says that to Luke.
Does he?
Yeah, in episode 4.
They were in after he did the training.
Yeah, like with the visor down.
Yeah.
Well, but in this, and I only know this because of the subtitles. By the way, I watched it with the subtitles.
Same. I always watch it with subtitles.
Obi-Wan specifically said Rey ? Like wondering if it was her, and then he said these are your first steps as she falls back and let's go to the lightsaber. So Obi-Wan is specifically talking to Rey. If we assume it's Obi-Wan's Force Ghost, which I always did,
Mm-hmm.
but it could also be a Force echo of the lightsaber. But what do we think about this scene? What is this scene in the context of Rey's
I don't
story?
know, man. I'm still like confused as to what all that was.
This is the great
like. There's a
tease,
lot
man.
going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, George.
This is the great tease. This is like when you're reading a comic book and there's like, oh yeah, we haven't heard from this person in a while. We think he's gone crazy, and they like go over to his apartment and there's like a chalkboard just full of like stuff, and it's like those are the stories that you're gonna be reading in DC Comics for the next like year and a half. You know, like this was totally that. Like I thought for sure she was part of the Jedi Academy, and then she had like amnesia. I thought for sure we were gonna like actually get that. Like I thought every scene in this moment was going to be extrapolated like in further material. Like I thought it was just the great tease, and like the whole thing will make sense by the end of the third movie in the trilogy. Like we will understand the context behind all this. A little frustrating that we didn't get there.
Yeah, I know.
Extremely frustrating. Extremely. Real quick before we move on, I'm going to pause the recording. Now we can go to the bathroom, get a drink. All right.
We're so close to done. I think we got like another half hour in us, and then we're good.
I know. I guess I got.
Yeah.
That's so bad.
Yeah, me too.
Get in.
All right, we're back, Coach. So you didn't really give us your thoughts on the lightsaber scene. What do you think? You just said you didn't know, but when you looked at this, when you thought about it, what did you see?
I mean, it's something I thought about that for the next 3 years. I tried to figure out how is that going to relate to who Rey is.
Right.
Was Rey at the temple? That's my biggest thing, and I kept asking that. Why did they show her at the temple?
Right.
You know, I'm assuming that was the temple, but why was she there? And then when remember that point where he had that, I don't know if this is his first or his second tantrum, but he said with the girl. And then he like freaked out. So I'm like, okay, so I took that freak out with the vision or whatever that was, memory, lost memory. And I'm like, okay, they got to know each other.
Right.
Are they cousins? That's
there's so much foreshadowing with Rey's character. So much. Now, George, I want to ask you specifically, because you like Episode 8. Do you think Rian Johnson pulled like a nosedive for Rey's story? Or do you think that like there really wasn't a plan?
I think that there was a plan, and I think we'll get into it specifically in Episode 8, but I think the whole idea behind The Last Jedi was that like this like aristocracy of this one family being the most important in the galaxy is BS. Like I can't have this person be just like another Skywalker. Like we have to start telling different stories in a universe this big. And like I understand that feeling, but if you really feel that way, like dude, direct your own trilogy. Like direct something that's not one of the mainline movies. Like that's
right.
I like Episode 8 the least. I still like it, but I like it the least of the three. But like it seemed like you're right. Like that was just like a total middle finger to the whole hero's journey thing. Like, and I do think it's like not a coincidence that like that happened right around the time that like Trump was elected president. Like, just strictly because of like the populist message that got Trump president. Like the fact that he was like reaching out to people like outside of cities in particular, like rural communities who felt like neglected and ignored, and they felt like it was they couldn't compete with like the interests of people in the cities and like big lobby groups. Like it was like that messaging about like that sort of political platform, as opposed to just being like strong art. He's just like, I'm going to be a different kind of Republican. And like that was like the same time that like Rey was just like, no dude, you're literally just a freaking nobody. Like you could not matter less. Like you are not important in the grand scheme of the galaxy. Like I don't think it's a coincidence that like those two things were like kind of happening simultaneously. And I think that's like one of the more fascinating parts of that movie. But in this movie in particular, they were so setting up the pieces for her to be someone important.
Yeah, I'm glad you agree, because I was thinking going into this that you probably didn't think that, but I'm glad you agree as a film major that they're obviously setting things up, because after that, Maz offers the lightsaber to Rey. Maz apparently hears that or something, comes down, offers the lightsaber to Rey, and Rey almost has like a reactionary response to it, like she can't take the lightsaber. and then runs away into the forest, like almost like having like sort of like a panic attack type situation. I took it. And then
And then
after,
all hell breaks loose.
well, yeah. So after she runs into the forest, Hux, the scene cuts to Hux on Starkiller Base. This is when he launches Starkiller Base's laser attack on the Republic. In a scene that, in my opinion, falls very short of the emotional response that they probably went for. When I watched that scene, I'm like, okay, there's a bunch of planets we don't know with a bunch of people we don't care about.
Yeah, it had no meaning.
Yeah. Okay, the Republic's gone. We haven't even seen the Republic.
Well, again, also, it's like the 9th war crime that they've committed at this point.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm very anti-war crime. I'm not condoning what they did, but also there was just no weight to what they did, besides, like, look at them be horrible and kill 7 planets at once.
But, and it was the opposite effect of when...
Alderaan.
You know, the death, exactly. Because Leia was there, you know, and she said the rebel base was on Dantooine and it wasn't there. And then, you know, then Moff's like, you're far too
trusting.
Yeah. So then they took it out, and then it had meaning, right? Because even Obi-Wan felt it.
Yeah.
And he's going 1,000,000 miles an hour, right? In the Millennium Falcon. So, and then this one, it was just like, you're right, Seth. Like, or George also is like, okay, and
yeah, exactly.
Terrible, but like, you know,
I have no relation to any of these planets or characters. I'm like, okay, a bunch of people are dying in a movie, I guess.
Well, that, and there's a young black woman who's like prominently featured in like one of the shots, like as like the lasers like descending onto her planet.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I know that was a person who, like, had scenes that were cut. But, like, they left that scene in, you know? And so it's just like, oh, man, I probably would have cared more if you guys had left those other scenes in there, you know? Like, probably would have meant more, but you didn't, so I can't. It's not on me.
But the weird thing is that the First Order then launches an attack on Maz Kanata's planet. And, you know... Well, we'll get to the weird thing, but Maz then gives the lightsaber to Finn, who takes it like anyone would, and he just starts icing stormtroopers, right? And he meets this stormtrooper who screams, you know, traitor, and does the famous like spinny shock trooper thing. And that was interesting because right after Episode 7 came out, they made the comic book with Finn in it. That guy was actually a training partner of Finn's coming up through like the Stormtrooper Academy, I guess. And they had like a rivalry. There's this whole backstory between this one Stormtrooper that had this fight with him, who then just gets obliterated by Chewbacca's bowcaster.
Oh, incredible!
But before that, remember though, he kicked, he got Finn down on the ground. Like,
he was about to finish Finn. Yeah. And
see, I was okay with that, even though he's swinging around Luke, and that's Anakin's lightsaber, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Anakin.
So,
Luke's.
Yeah, I say Anakin because I like Anakin more. But anyways, so he's trying to do his best, and I took it as okay. He had basic, you know, training on how to use the shock things, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what they use to fight Jedi.
Right.
So when he picked up that lightsaber, he kind of knew how to, you know, deal with it.
Everyone's seen how to swing a sword, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've had basic sword training. Could I hold my own against like a samurai grandmaster? No. But I'm better than the average person.
Yeah, and also it's just like that guy. It's just like, all right, is he like special forces? Probably not. Like, is he a private in the army? Maybe. Also, like, they seem kind of like like low on troops? Is he like the equivalent of like a mall guard? Like, is he just like someone from like the like the
Paul
detention?
Blart.
Yeah, is he just like from the detention center on some Star Destroyer? But he was just like, oh
Well,
no, like I need to do this for my first
Well,
order.
I mean,
you
like
know?
Finn was in
Yeah, he's
charge
a
of
janitor, man. Yeah, exactly.
so if I remember correctly about the story, and I'm sorry, it's been so long since I read it, but I think Finn consistently beat this guy in like their training, like their combat arts training, and that developed like a grudge rivalry almost from that guy. They made this whole backstory for this character, which was completely unneeded. But
That's awesome though.
yeah,
It's still so weird to me that he like recognized Finn, and I guess I
yeah,
never thought about it, but like I was just like, oh yeah, I guess they would have seen each other with their helmets off. But
yeah.
like at first I was like, how do you know that guy was that guy was like a trooper? He was always wearing a helmet. Like I just never really
Yeah.
put two and two together because like, can you imagine any of the stormtroopers from the original trilogy with their helmets off?
No, it's
Yeah.
weird to think about.
Right, but then this is like the first time you're seeing this type of
Yeah.
thing since the original trilogy, and you're just like, huh, yeah, I guess you're right. They would have taken the helmet. That's weird. That, yeah, probably in the commissary, eating snacks
Yeah,
with their helmets
exactly.
off.
Well, there was that one episode or two episodes in Rebels where they were Ezra went undercover and he was in the stormtrooper
Oh yeah,
Academy, right?
program,
I
right?
remember that.
So
That's
they
a
would
great
take
scene.
their helmets off, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
I
So they
remember
would
that
take
now.
their
That's a great episode.
Yeah, it is.
I completely
It
forgot
is.
about. So where are we at here? Finn has that great scene, and this is the scene we were talking about earlier with the bowcaster that we kind of alluded to. The bowcaster is featured so prominently in this scene where not only are people getting hit by it, but Han uses it, and when people get hit by it, they get obliterated. They start flying.
Not only that,
everywhere.
well, not only that, but I saw parts of their armor fly off.
Yeah, which you
So
don't see
it was-
really.
Right.
You really ever see that before. So when you do see that, they make it very clear this bowcaster has a lot of heat behind it. When it smacks somebody, it sends them into orbit, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
But also relevant for later on, which we're
Right.
going to talk about. But then they start getting pushed back. The Resistance comes to the rescue in that great scene that we have with Poe that we were talking about earlier, and where he's sniping people on the ground. Really powerful scene. I had a lot of questions about it. I was like, okay, how did they know there was a battle going on here?
Right.
And why were they not on those Republic planets that were blown up? And like, where did they come from so fast? I had a lot of questions about
I don't.
what's going on with the
They
scene.
travel at light speed. Who gives a crap where they were coming from?
Well, yeah, I mean,
I assume this is all like local stuff, and like Maz Kanata probably called. Like as soon as her house got blown up, I assume she made some phone calls because she knew who Han was, she knew who Leia was, and like she knew like
That's
their
fair.
marriage was like on the rocks. So like I assume she's got like at least someone on speed dial who could like
A red phone, like,
yeah, exactly.
Leia, get over here. Your hubby is in trouble.
So
Yeah.
I guess we have to assume that there was an 8th planet of the Republic that Leia and
Well, remember though,
was
like
on?
I told you, is the Resistance
okay,
is not really part. It is part of the Republic, but they're just like, yeah, you guys do whatever you want. Like,
also I forgot to write this down, but I remember reading about it in the book Bloodlines. It goes over Leia's political history and how she was a large figure in the Republic, and then I guess there's this really interesting part of her story that comes out where it comes out that Vader was her dad, and it absolutely tanks her political
yeah,
career.
I heard about that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
There's like a propaganda campaign launched against her that actually tanks her political career, which I think is amazing.
How could you prove that though? I mean, like you burned Vader's body,
I don't know.
and like, is there any record that shows that Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader? And she's just like, but my last name's Organa.
Yeah,
There's no paternity test.
Right.
He is not the father.
I don't know. I haven't read the book, but I read about the book. And
Think about
I
how
in
old she
preparation
is.
for this.
And she's probably like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with working with these people. Because from the beginning, well, I guess from the beginning of End of Return of the Jedi, she always had issues working with politicians,
Mhm.
bureaucrats. So she probably is like, you know what? Screw this. F you guys. I'm out.
Yeah,
I'm bouncing.
she probably didn't even like him when she was like working in the Senate. She just liked them more than she hated like the Emperor, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
Right.
yeah. But speaking of Leia, after the Resistance comes and saves the day, Leia lands. We get a reunion between Han and Leia. Oh no, that didn't happen yet. We have to have Rey versus Kylo #1, where Kylo suspends Rey, pretty much just isolates her, and does like a weird like finger clip thing where he knocks her unconscious.
oh yeah, he does like a literal like mind wipe where it looks like he just like
Yeah,
wiped across her forehead and she just like falls like one of those like push
yeah.
puppet dolls, like the wooden ones. Yeah.
Right.
But what I wrote down for this specific scene was that, and again, props to Daisy Ridley, because when Kylo froze her, you could really see like the terror she was having. Because not only was she having a panic attack from this crazy force vision she had, but all of a sudden Kylo Ren is standing in front of her and blocking all her blaster bolts. She had never seen someone with a lightsaber before, right? He's blocking all these blaster bolts she's firing at him. She's probably never seen that. That's crazy enough as it is. But he's got this black robe. He freezes her. She can't move. He's talking to her. I mean, that is a horrifying situation, and Daisy
Yeah.
really sold it perfectly.
Have you guys ever had sleep paralysis?
Yes, but fortunately for me, I knew what was going on beforehand.
I did not the first time, and I think I remembered the word sleep paralysis and just kind of assumed that's what it was. But I was just like, did I die? Like, am I dead? Because like I can't open my eyes, I can't move my body
Right.
whatsoever.
I had that happen, and I literally thought it was Satan.
Yeah, right. Like,
Because I didn't know about those sleep paralysis, and I had it probably like 3 times, and I was just like, I thought it was Satan. You know, but then, but you know, what's funny is you bring that up. The other night, not last night, but the night before, I had a dream that somebody came into the house, like I thought it was real, and they grabbed my neck, and I was trying to lift up. So I had like a minor sleep paralysis because I couldn't. And then I remember I just let loose a little bit, and then I like jumped up,
Just
and I
exploded.
literally woke up and was like jumping out of bed. I was like, that was a weird moment. So that's funny
Right.
to bring that up.
well, like,
Right? Yeah.
that's like the feeling I got when he like froze her, and I was just like, oh no, like that's actually a nightmare of mine. Like this is
Oh,
like
okay, yeah, I
terrifying
see.
that he's
Yeah.
able to like have this power over someone else.
Yeah, like he had complete control over her. He freezes her. Is like interrogating her right there. Realizes like, oh, I need like more time. I need to like handle this on the ship. Does like I said, that thing which we haven't ever seen before that or since then, where he just wipes her out completely, which I think is like interesting, because you imagine if Kylo Ren has the ability to like pull information from someone's head, freeze them. It makes sense that he'd be able to just knock someone out as well, just like completely shut their consciousness off. So then he takes Rey and carries her into the ship. Han sees her. Finn freaks out. And they fly away. But then Leia comes down.
But first, you can't forget, you see Han looking at Kylo.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
Han sees Han sees him. And he sees Kylo carrying Rey into the ship and then fly away. So Han's like, oh, there's my child.
Right.
My Satan dark side child. But yeah, then Leia comes down. They have a nice reunion where she's like, same jacket. And he's like, no, new jacket. You changed your hair. And it was interesting because I felt like we were getting a reunion. I think that's what they were going for. The fact that we were getting a reunion more than those two were getting a reunion. Because that's what it felt like to me. Was like,
but it wasn't on happy terms. That's the thing. That's what clouded the whole them two getting back together. It wasn't on happy terms. It wasn't like, oh, sweetie, come here. And like, I saw him.
I felt like there was obviously conflict going on in their relationship, but to me, it felt like even though that was happening, they were still happy to see each other for the first time in forever. That's what it came off like to me. But yeah, I thought it was funny. He was like, "No, new jacket," but it's the same exact jacket. But he bought the same one. And then we get Chewbacca obviously hugging Leia, which is a sweet scene. You know,
it's funny. It reminded me a lot of remember like the old TV movie It, where like the kids finally like reunite after like for their like high school reunion because like someone dies or whatever. Like it had that same sort of vibe where it's just like, oh hey, it's good to see you. I'm glad tragedy could bring us together once again. Like it was so depressing.
Yeah, but
it was a depressing reunion.
But to be fair, the scenes where Han and Leia are together, to me, it felt like they didn't skip a beat. Like their characters just came back together so good. Where they're, later in the movie, they're going through the plans, and Leia's like, "Don't say," or Han's like, "I'm trying my best," or whatever. I forget what he exactly says, and Leia's like, "When did that ever help?" And don't say the Death Star. I'm like, that's so good. That's exactly what I would imagine them saying. Yeah.
Also, we're basically fighting the Death Star, so like, what do we want? Like, we have the playbook, like,
big giant Death Star.
Yeah.
And then we get the scene of, well, I guess exactly the scene we're talking about, where Han and Leia are talking, and Han just goes, "I just think there's too much Vader in him." And I wrote down next time, I was like, they really just gave up on him?
Also, that's such an incredible, because that's like, this wasn't my fault at all. It was your crappy dad's fault. Like, that's just him completely shirking responsibility. It's just like, I wonder if like the loner drug dealing smuggler, I wonder if that had any influence on their son's like less than stellar outcome. No, it was like the space Nazi grandfather. Like, it's gotta be. Can't be me. No, sir. No, not me. Not now.
Right? Like, who would have guessed Han Solo's not a great dad?
Yeah.
This is like a typical dysfunctional family almost.
Yeah. But yeah, they just gave up on him, and I just can't get over that. After I realized that when watching this movie this last time, I was like,
well, it's like, it's hard to feel bad for Kylo. Like he was always scared of being abandoned. They like really show that in episode 8, and then like everyone proved him right. You know. Except for Snoke.
Because again, we find out later, Leia was a trained Jedi. And she was, according to episode 9, just as good as Luke, if not better. She could have done something. But if we take all the movie's stories at face value, literally, she just chose not to.
Right. She could have said, "Hey, twin brother, we need to go get your nephew, my son, because this Snoke, you and I are going to have to take him out.
Right.
And we're going to die trying."
And I would also like to say, it doesn't make sense to me that Leia never looked for Luke either. Like, I think if you really take Leia's story, it doesn't make any sense.
Right. That's why when she didn't go with Rey at the end, I felt that was a little weird. Like,
well, again, you say that like she was like discarded from having a political career because of like someone finding out that Darth Vader was her father, but like again, I'm sorry, like if it doesn't happen in the movies, like it doesn't count,
Right.
And so like I assume she was too busy like trying to run the New Republic. Like that was the vibe I got the first time I saw it. Was like she was so consumed with her political career that like
but
she didn't have time to mess off and find Luke or stick up for Kylo or Ben.
Right. But at that point, in The Force Awakens, she goes to Jurassic Park girl and say, "You're my number 2 and you're going to run this shit and I'm going to go find my son."
Yeah.
Fair.
Laura Dern, right?
Yeah. It's really hard to get a good grasp on Leia's character here, because then she has a single conversation with Han and she's like, "All right, go give him a shot. They're still good in him. I know it." And I just can't
bring our son back.
I just can't help but be like, why now? Obviously, Kylo Ren's been wreaking havoc across the galaxy for the last 10 years. We have to assume that.
Yeah.
Why now? And they just don't go into detail. Maybe there were some deleted scenes or something.
It's because the cameras are on, man. Like I think that's like the only real explanation there is because it's like, well, we didn't do it yesterday. When's the best day to quit smoking cigarettes? Today is the best day to quit smoking cigarettes.
I guess that's fair. Yeah. And then after that, we get the Kylo Ren and Rey interrogation scene, the famous one that I think starts to kind of pull apart Rey's character, as we mentioned earlier. This is the first time we see Kylo Ren take off his helmet, because she says like something like, "There's this masked man trying to kill me when you want to kill him too," and he takes off the mask, and there's something that slipped through that I didn't notice before, and he says, "I need your part of the map. We got the rest of it from the Imperial archives."
Mhm.
And I'm like, "What? Isn't that kind of like isn't that kind of like a, I don't know, came out of nowhere, right? They just have the rest of Luke Skywalker's map from the
I
Imperial
don't remember him
archives."
saying that, so I'll have to go back and look at that
Well, they do
scene.
because
Yeah.
they had like an incomplete map before. Like they had the map of the galaxy or like part of the galaxy where he was in, but
Yeah.
like not like the specific path where he was. Like
Yeah, so
I'm sorry,
they needed
the resistance.
well, no, R2D2 I thought was the only one that
Yeah, had
had
it. Yeah.
the final piece. So he was looking for the map that Ray had seen, but it seems like he would already had that part of the map.
Not super clear. I will give you that.
Yeah.
I think this part's really interesting though because of like what the mask means. And so like Vader was like imprisoned by his mask. Like that was like a
Right.
monument to all of his shame. Like that was
Right.
he was like this beautiful arrogant person, right? And then like his arrogance is like what cost him like his physicality. Like he went from looking like Hayden Christensen to looking like a computer mouse,
Right.
and so the fact that like Kylo is like electing to look like him, he takes off his helmet and he's got like a beautiful scar-free face, like he is completely fine, but it's just like him wanting so bad. He's just such a poser, man. Like it's great. Like
Right.
the fact that he so wants to be Darth Vader that he just like insists on wearing this helmet, even though like there's no function to the helmet besides like he's doing like black like Darth Vader face basically at that point, right? Like
Yeah.
he's like culturally appropriating Sith culture at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you say that because like he's like the anti-Vader. He's like the complete opposite of Darth Vader, and he doesn't realize it because Darth Vader, like you said, was imprisoned by a suit. He hated his suit. He tried to get another suit built, and the Empire shut it down, or the Emperor shut it down. And the Emperor made the suit purposefully painful for Vader to wear to increase his power, to make him more hateful.
Yeah.
And Kylo Ren doesn't know any of that. He just knows that Vader wore all black and had a helmet and was a bad guy, it seems like. And it's like, yeah, I can't take this guy seriously because he's just like we said earlier, like a bratty kid who's a poser. And
Yeah.
I think it's amazing that I think it's exactly what they were going for too. It seems like it was.
Well, it's like, when you're 12 years old and you listen to the Smiths and you're like, this is incredible. But, like, you don't understand the Smiths until you're, like, 20,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, I like The Cure. It's like, no, you don't, man. You don't understand them yet. Wait a second.
But then there's the scene we talked about earlier where, he tries to pull the information from Rey and interrogate her, and Rey overpowers him, reverses it, and she says the really important line to Kylo's character, that she senses all his fear and that he's afraid he's never going to be as powerful as Darth Vader. Which is like something that I feel like is obvious from his character, but that he had never come face to face with before at that point.
That was a big slap in the face, a big wake up for him.
Right.
He's like,
Also super meta again, scared that like this villain's not going to be as iconic as Darth Vader, and like no one ever was. I'm sorry, Darth Vader is like one of the most iconic, if not straight up the most iconic villain of all time. Like no one's going to compete with him. I'm sorry.
Anybody can see a silhouette of Vader and know exactly who it is.
They can hear a picture of Darth Vader.
Yes.
Like that's how pronounced he is, and like in the public subconscious, like he's just there at all times.
Yes.
And so, like, yeah, dude, you were never going to be as powerful as Darth Vader. I'm sorry, you were never going to have the cultural impact that Darth Vader was. And so that's another, like, I think metatextual line, which I think is just like awesome, but also frustrating. I don't know really how to feel about it.
Yeah. Like I said, I have a lot of problems with this scene. I think it breaks down not only Rey's character, I think it breaks down Kylo's character. It's really, in my opinion, for me, like I said, I love this movie. This is the worst part of it, is they just give Rey everything she needs. I don't know the reason behind it. I don't know what they were going for. Like I said, I think they probably had a bigger... I think this was probably meant to be another foreshadowing of who she was, but it didn't end up working out. So now I kind of look at this scene with a little bit more disappointment. then I don't remember exactly why Kylo leaves, but he walks out, and then Rey uses the Force influence to influence Daniel Craig's character, like we talked about earlier, and gets out on her own. And then Kylo sees Rey missing and has his meltdown number 2, which I think this one's really funny because this is when the stormtroopers come around the corner
Yeah.
and they hear him having a meltdown, like it's
They
every
just-
other Saturday.
It's so good. And they just turn around. It's so good.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, oh, here we go again, and they knew exactly what was happening, and they just left, which I think is amazing because that's another like thing we're talking about with Kylo's character, like where they amplify the fact that he is this like dude who cannot handle any stress whatsoever and just breaks down at the first sign of stress and not getting his way, which I think is incredible. And then they decide they're going to launch Starkiller's base again. Do you guys remember where they were launching it?
They were going to launch it at the where the rebels or where the resistance was.
Seems a little bit overkill for one planet, but whatever. And then we see like a classic scene of the resistance and the rebellion talking about Starkiller base. And the thing I hate the most is they're just like, oh, we have to destabilize the core. There must be an entry point somewhere. So it's just like you said, George, just like A New Hope. Like, just like A New Hope and Episode 6, by the way, where they're like, oh, there's a weak point right here. We'll just get right in there and blow it up.
Which is funny because they kind of invalidated that as the movies went on, right? Because like we find out that like the reason it was easy to blow up the first Death Star was because Mads Mikkelsen made it so it was easy to blow up the first Death Star. And so it's like, all right, what's your excuse this time, guys? Because you didn't have a sympathetic rebel designing the specs on Planet Starkiller, you know?
Yeah. And it's just
and
like
this is where, to me, this is where it starts to crumble.
Yeah.
And the fact that the pieces fit too perfect, you know. So
because then Finn starts talking about the shields and they create this plan to destabilize the core, but either way the resistance moves out and Han and Leia get one last kind of like bittersweet moment together, and then they start enacting the plan to rescue Rey and blow up Starkiller base before it gets this last shot off and kills a whole bunch more people. Classic kind of heroics. And there's this really weird scene where Han's like, I'm just gonna jump through their shields at light speed. And Finn's like, you can do that? And Han's like, I never asked that question until after I've done it. It's like,
well, I mean, he didn't do something dissimilar earlier in the movie, right? Like, didn't they light speed out of like the big ship they were in with like the weird monsters? Like, didn't they go through the door? Like, they didn't like blast a hole in it first, right? Like, they literally light sped through the door.
Yes.
All right. That is super weird. And like that's not technically wrong because like there is like that's what like quantum tunneling is. It's just like the idea that like an electron can be outside, like there could be something between an electron and like its nuclear core. Like that's totally a thing that's like being discussed in science. I barely understand it, but I understand like the most basic principles of it.
Right.
It's like, I guess, yeah, if you're going fast enough and like you're just like doing like transmatter material, like, yeah, why not? Like, also, this film series stars space wizards. So, like, again, it's like one of those things where like I don't know if I would enjoy it more if there was like such a rigid structure of what's possible or what's not possible. But this is like the closest I can get to being like, it's getting a little ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like,
or Han Solo is able to make like reactions at light speed is where I kind of fall apart. I'm like, all right.
Maybe when you were younger, definitely not now.
Maybe Anakin, but not.
I would stretch for that too, but
yeah.
Either way, they crash land on Starkiller base, and we have this amazing scene where like they're trying to figure out a way, and Finn's like, use the Force.
Yeah, he's like, that's not how it works.
That's not how the Force works. And then we find out that Finn was in sanitation. He wasn't like this badass trooper that we kind of all assumed at this point he was, or at least I did. I assumed he was like this highly trained like special ops soldier. No, I'm just a janitor.
super smart dude for a janitor, though.
Yeah.
Like, good grief. And I don't mean that like condescendingly. I know lots of janitors are smart people, but like, and I don't know if like the knowledge he has is like basic knowledge in space, because like he seems to have a lot of technical know-how, like a lot of technical know-how for someone who in theory should not have been briefed on such materials for
Mhm.
Starkiller Base. But it is funny to be like, oh yeah, I guess there had to be stormtroopers and sanitation. Never thought about it, but yeah, of course there would have to, like, yeah, like someone has to like peel the potatoes, man. Like,
Right.
you never think about it, but like
No.
absolutely.
I
We have a
love
machine
it, by
for
the
that.
way. I
What's
love
up?
it.
What was that, Coach?
I said we have a machine for that.
Oh, you do now. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So you don't have, you just throw them in this thing. It's like a big sandpaper inside, and it just
Oh, super
peels
cool.
it off.
All right, well, someone's still got to drop them in. You know, someone's
Right
still.
there you go. There you go.
By the way, I love the back and forth of this part of the movie because Finn is hell bent on getting into rescue Rey, right? And this whole time, Rey's like, actually, I'm just gonna walk out of here on my own. I'm doing pretty good on my own, you know. And then they end up getting inside the base where they find Captain Phasma once again, and she's just kind of like she's just there, and she just gets beat up. He activates the shields and throws them in, gets thrown into a trash compactor, I guess.
That's where I was just like,
Yeah,
that
I'm like,
part was
what is the point of this character, and why didn't we just throw her out?
not
after
even
this
that,
scene?
but that would never happen. Like, she would alert people. Like, that's just not going to happen. And what's the chances of them in that huge base running into her? Like, imagine a huge, back in the day, the World Trade Center, right? And you get in there, you don't know where you're going. You know a general area, and you just happen to run into her. You know,
Yeah,
I don't know. It
yeah,
would,
and we gotta remember like this is a planet-sized base too.
right.
I don't really know if the base encompasses the whole planet, but we can assume that it's extremely large.
That's
Right.
that's not fair, though. I mean, like, I guess it's like kind of inconsequential, you know. But like, what are the odds that when escaping Naboo, that the ship would crash land near Mos Espa, which is where Anakin Skywalker was? Like, what are the chances? You know,
Sure.
like, I like you can just do that for so much stuff that I feel like it's
That's
not
fair.
fair to do it here.
Yeah, you're
Well,
right.
but the thing is like, but she being so high up, she's not just going to be like, okay, I surrender. I'll go ahead and turn it off.
Yeah,
She would never do that. Someone that high up would not do that.
I kind of
agree.
agree. I think it's a weird scene, and it's I really hate Captain Phasma's character. I really do. I hate that character, and I think it's because of stuff like this where it's like she doesn't do anything over 3 movies besides like is just there kind of, and I thought she died like 3 times throughout these movies, and she just keeps coming
Was she
back.
in the third
and-
one?
No,
Yeah, no, is she not?
no.
Because you remember her eye, you could see her eye in the second one.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, you're right. Yeah, because I was thinking the battle with Finn happened in the third one, but it does happen in the second one. But yeah, she just keeps coming back. I hate Phasma's character. But then we kind of move into the end of the movie, right? Because right after this is when Han and Kylo have their confrontation. Something that I think can be taken multiple ways when they meet up. Because, and I don't know, I wish I would have gotten the authentic experience, but I had this part spoiled for me. Did you guys get spoiled?
One of my students said it. I was like, "Are you freaking kidding me? I'm gonna go see it today."
Yeah,
So yeah,
I was spoiled for this.
I got mugged like 2 weeks before this movie came out, and I was just in like such a weird place mentally that like I didn't connect to anything.
Oh really?
And so
That sucks.
I got mugged in San Francisco, yeah. And so like I didn't engage with like literally anything. And then this was like the first time I like took myself out like by myself since I got mugged, was to like go see this movie. But like I think I went out at like a matinee, like I like blew off classes that day if I even had any, or like I think my semester had just ended. Like it was some timing where like I was able to do this. I had just moved apartments, and I just like took myself to see it. So I had nothing spoiled for me. But also
That's
like
great.
but also you definitely got the vibe as soon you're just like, oh, this is not going to end well. And then like I remembered everything that like Harrison Ford had said about episode 6, and I was like, oh no. Like,
Yeah, so in my opinion, every time I watch this, I get the feeling that Kylo Ren wasn't lying when he was talking to Han Solo, where he was like, I feel myself being torn apart. You know what I'm saying? Like, it does seem like there's a lot of conflict within Kylo Ren. I think they give you that throughout the movies, where it's like he's pretending to be someone he's not. He feels he has to be someone he's not. And that really deep down, we have this vulnerable guy who's just looking for like a mentor and a place to belong, is how I view it. And his dad let him down, his mom let him down, Luke Skywalker let him down, everyone's let him down. So he kind of found his way here, and now he's faced with Han Solo, and he's been told forever that he needs to let go of his attachments, and Han Solo's his dad, and he feels hurt by him, and so he ices Han Solo, and probably doesn't feel any better afterwards. That's kind of how I viewed it.
Well, yeah, for me, it's like emotionally, it didn't do anything for me. Like we didn't see anything with Han and Ben, So like when he killed him, it was like, okay, that's the feeling I got, was like, okay, that happened. But it wasn't like the feeling we got when Vader said, Luke, I'm your father, right? Because we had this tension between the two, a little bit in the first movie and then in an Empire, right?
Right.
There wasn't that same feeling when Kylo got him,
Luke,
But this is what I enjoyed about it, is you got to think Chewie is pretty much the uncle to Ben, right? To Kylo.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
So he's seeing this, and then without hesitation, he wanted to take out his nephew.
Blast him.
Like he wanted to end his life right there. And, when I look back on it, I'm like, I would not be surprised if Han told Chewie to change Ben's diaper, right? Like right. They had that interaction. Like sure. Ben was probably crawling all over Chewie and stuff like that. So Chewie loved Ben.
Chewie probably taught him how to fly, man.
Right. So when he, without hesitation, boom, when I looked at that again, I'm like, I like that part more than I did.
Because he screams. Chewbacca screams out of anger. That's his best friend.
Yeah, dude, that's what I was thinking. Like, there's the scene in Episode 4 where like Luke yells no as Vader like kills Kenobi. Obi-Wan. There's the scene in Episode 3 where Vader finds out Padme's dead and he yells no. There's just like all these great dramatic scenes throughout. There's like Obi-Wan seeing Qui-Gon Jinn die. He gets out like a good no. There's Return of the Jedi, Darth Vader going no. Like there's just so many great scenes with no. This one hits me the hardest because you can't understand what Chewie's saying, but you know exactly what he's saying. And it's like that yell he gives.
That was rage.
Yeah, that yell, I feel that one in my heart, man. Like that was such a great noise delivery that the sound department did.
Right, but remember, Chewie also had one in 9 that was very depressing when he found out Leia died. Remember?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that one's.
And then Rey had one when she thought Chewie died.
Yeah.
In Episode 9.
Well, that's a whole different thing. Episode 9 has a lot of really fast moments that I'm sure we're gonna get to.
I'm not gonna be able to defend Episode 9 as as well as I think I have to, but
George, what was your take on this scene when you saw it? I know you said you were in a weird place, but obviously seeing Han Solo die is...
Yeah, that meant a lot to me. I will be honest, I always thought Indiana Jones was cooler than Han Solo growing up, but like Han Solo, undeniably awesome, Yeah. But again, just like the metatextual reading about like them like literally killing the past. Like I thought that was really just like interesting and like kind of bold, but not surprising just because of how Harrison Ford did speak about Episode 6 and how he wanted Han Solo's character to die in Episode 6.
Right.
And so, yeah, I agree. Also, like he totally could have like put one between the eyes on Kylo, right?
Yes, yes. There's a great comic. I don't know if I shared it with you guys the other day, but
Oh,
I
it's like
just
an
came across it.
eight panel comic, right? That someone made
Yes.
about just like him seeing that, and then like him like aiming for his head, and then like him remembering every memory with like baby Ben, and then
Yeah.
him just being like son of a bitch, and then he just like aims the crossbow down
Yeah.
and like hits him in the thigh or wherever, or like the hip, wherever he gets him.
One thing I think is really amazing about this too, that a lot of people forget about this scene because they're so overtaken with Han Solo dying, is that Chewbacca goes absolutely buck wild here. Starts blowing shit up and starts like killing people and like absolutely just in a blind rage. And starts the actual destruction of Starkiller Base. Right, it starts going off the rails because of this, and then is when Rey, Finn, and Kylo all end up in the forest,
Yeah.
and we get the climax of the movie with Rey getting blasted into a tree, knocked unconscious, and Finn just doing his best to hold off this Jedi. But George, you said you had the interesting theory about the bowcaster.
Yeah. And so we were talking about this earlier. You hinted at it. All we were seeing the entire movie was like how powerful this bowcaster was. Like you explained that
Right.
like dudes were getting blasted into orbit.
Yeah.
They didn't even have to be hit by it; they just had to be near it, and they would just be launched.
Right.
And then Chewie hits Kylo Ren, like gets like center mass on him, you know, like, and Kylo Ren is still like standing up. So like that proves all right, Kylo Ren kind of a badass because we saw explicitly, like they very clearly demonstrated to the audience how powerful this weapon was, and he
Right.
took it. And like at first I thought that this was like kind of him being a masochist. I don't know if this is him just like getting like his powers or whatever, but like the way he like hits his thigh like right where he was shot, just to be like,
Mm-hmm.
I can take it, like I can keep dishing it, like I can keep taking it. I thought that was like kind of incredible, and like him being so weird in that entire scene because like he clearly just went through a lot. Like I'm with you. I don't think he wanted to kill Han Solo. Like I totally believe that he was conflicted, and then he just made a decision that he couldn't take back. You know?
Okay, real quick, I don't mean to interrupt
No,
you,
you're fine.
but okay, so, and I just thought of this, and going back to earlier what Seth was saying about Vader's suit is he felt so much physical pain in that suit so that
Mm-hmm.
he could tap into the dark side. And I didn't realize, what if he's hitting his wound to feel pain so he could tap into the dark side?
Very
Yeah,
well could
that's
be.
kind
Yeah.
of how I viewed it. Was just like he was so full of rage that he was just like, ah, because I've seen people do that before when they get angry. They'll like, they'll just start like hurting themselves because they're crazy. They're absolutely out of like normalcy at that
Oh,
point.
okay, yeah.
And I just think it's so like I feel the desperation from Finn in this fight, right? Where like Kylo Ren, it comes off almost toying with him. Finn
Yeah.
is like desperately trying to like defend himself, and Kylo Ren just pushes him up against a tree, and uses the exhaust port to burn Finn. And I'm like, oh, that is sweet. I'm like, that is sweet.
I love it too because it's just like, dude, even on my worst day, you are nothing to me. You know, like
Yes.
I just got shot in the leg. I just killed my dad. I got like a lot going on mentally right now. You're just here, and I don't even care. I don't even notice you. Like it's so good.
One thing I do think is BS about this fight, though, is when Kylo Ren kind of spins behind him and slashes up his whole back. Finn somehow survives that. I'm like, all right, JJ, you've obviously seen Star Wars before. This is not how like lightsabers are supposed to work.
Well, it looked surface. It looked like a surface scratch. Like I don't know. Like I don't think he like really got him. Like again, I think he was toying with him. Like he didn't cut him in
I
half.
do too.
Whatever. Darth Maul was cut in half and he came back. Like whatever, man. Like,
True. He was.
Darth Vader had both of his legs cut off and like both of his arms cut off and was like left in like a pool of lava. So like I don't know. I'm willing to forgive. Like if I don't see organs, like I'm like all right, like that's fine.
Okay, that's a good point. I like that point.
That is fair. You bring up a lot of counterpoints to my single argument. Is this the first? By the way, is this the first movie we don't see someone with their limb chopped off in? There's a lot of limbs chopped off in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Not in the first one. In episode 4?
No, in episode
you're
4, in
right.
the bar. No, in the bar, Ponda Baba gets his arm
Yep,
chopped off.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone gets their limb chopped off in episode 7. That's crazy. I never thought about that before.
I'll be honest.
But then
I
we
have
get
not.
this.
I did not rewatch it this week. So I rewatched it like 2 weeks ago with my dad, and so I'm like, oh, that's early enough. But I will rewatch it soon and look for that. But no, I think it's awesome. I want to talk about the next part. So like Finn gets like knocked out,
Yes.
and Kylo sees like this artifact, right, of like Vader. You know, like this was like before he was Vader's like lightsaber, and he tries to pull for it, but like the lightsaber is not coming. And then all of a sudden the lightsaber starts moving and it runs past him, and it's being called to Rey, and Rey is able to like outpower Kylo to grab it. And like, correct me if I'm wrong, this is like the first time we get a piece of like original Star Wars music, like from the original trilogy. Like this is like when the theme, like the dun, like when Luke's like staring at the sunset, right? Like it's like that song.
Yes.
I believe this is like the first time there's like a direct callback to the original trilogy. And like that moment just cuts
it's also
me
the first.
Just cuts me in two. Like it wrecks me emotionally.
It's also the first time we get the classic lightsaber sound. It's a different sound when Rey ignites it this time. It's more of a classic lightsaber sound, whereas before when Finn had it and was just like using it, it was a different ignition sound.
Oh, so you think that it's because Rey is a Force user that it's going to sound? It's going to have a little bit more kick.
I don't think that. I think that was the intent by J.J. Abrams.
Okay.
When she grabbed it, like George said, the music hit, and we hit that nostalgic lightsaber blast.
Wow.
They obviously meant for that to be like a huge moment, and it was. Now, what did you guys think about the lightsaber seemingly having a mind of its own?
I didn't read it that way.
I didn't either.
Okay, how'd you read it?
Just as her being like more, I guess, like compelling.
Worthy?
Yeah,
I thought she was more worthy of it.
Which I guess you're right. Like I guess at that point, like that does impart a little bit of agency on the lightsaber itself, where it's just like, you know, the last time I was really used, I just murdered a bunch of kids. So I kind of want to redeem myself, you know, like.
Well, because they imply that earlier too, because Maz Kanata is like the lightsaber; it calls to you.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
And we never really got that impression of lightsabers before. It was always kind of, well, these were just weapons built by the Jedi. But I guess
a more civilized weapon from a more civilized age. Yeah.
Since then, they've expanded upon the Kyber crystal, I guess, and kind of made it seem like the Kyber crystals choose the wielders as well. So I guess it does make sense in the overall lore of Star Wars. We had just until this point never seen a lightsaber act that way. And then we get, after that, what I think is an amazing lightsaber battle. By the way, I love the choreography in this fight. Coach, you're shaking your head no.
Why? Okay, it was good, but this is the part where is the biggest letdown, the second biggest letdown.
I mean, I agree plot-wise, but the choreography...
The fact that she out-dueled him, I'm like, no.
Bro, he just got shot in the thigh by a gun that can launch people into space. Like, that's the thing. Like, she's
never...
I'm sorry. Continue.
She doesn't have the training. She doesn't have the training of the lightsaber of that. I mean, she has her staff, right, that she knows how to use, but I just don't see a 50% healthy Kylo Ren lose to a newbie, you know, no matter how strong in the Force she is. That was, to me, that was just like, come on, man. If you didn't want her to lose, have them at a standstill and then have the you know, what should I call it, divide, right? Like it did. But don't have her she kicked his ass at the end. Like it wasn't even like they dueled, and then once she felt it, like she's holding it up here, and then, you know, the Force called her, then she was unstoppable.
Yeah, so that's the part of the fight I do have a problem with. But I will say first off, like I was saying, I think the choreography in these new Star Wars lightsaber battles is amazing. It's like very raw and emotional, especially in this fight. It's not super flashy like we saw in the prequels, but it's not super like legitimate like we
Yeah,
saw
it's not
in
like
the sequel.
technical, right? Like there's no
Yes,
like technical expertise. Like you can't
right.
tell that someone's good with a lightsaber. You can just tell that they're stronger or weaker based on
Yes,
like how reactionary they are or something. Like I can't
yes.
quite piece it together, but like you're absolutely right.
In the original trilogy, George Lucas told them to wield lightsabers like they were extremely heavy broadswords. He wanted them to seem extremely heavy,
Mm.
and they used a lot of technique, and it was more of a legitimate fighting style. In the prequels, obviously, he was going for a more flashy, spinny, and you can like both of them. I like both of them, but the sequel lightsaber fights are my favorite because it's very much a mixture of kind of the two, where it's like very emotional. The lightsaber fights are very emotional. You can really feel the impact when they smack each other's blades. I really like that. Um, but I do agree with Coach. The moment when she like they're in like a lightsaber clash and she like closes her eyes and feels the force and then it gets a power up. I thought that was kind of lame. But I will say to the other side though, Kylo Ren was injured. They did seem like they were trying to make it seemed through a whole movie that injury was a big deal through the bowcaster, and he was also trying to turn Rey. He was. It seemed like he was, from my point of view, like he was taking it easy on her because he
Okay,
was
I
trying
see
to
that.
convince her to come over to his side, and then she kind of took a cheap shot, almost not a cheap shot, but surprised him. I would say
Right.
Sure.
Okay.
surprised him.
And also
Now
totally that,
remember,
that scene where she closes her eyes, she like stops being Rey at that point and she becomes like a conduit of the force. So like that was the will of the force at that point. So like that's another like my interpretation of it where I'm just like, okay, like she is like just channeling direct light side energy. Like of course she's gonna be able to like whoop this dude's ass who just got shot with a mortar in the thigh. Like
Essentially,
I'm
yeah,
willing to overlook that.
yeah,
remember in episode 3 at the beginning when Anakin defeats Dooku,
Oh,
right?
just hands
Dooku
hands him his ass. Yeah.
Dooku
awesome
is a
scene.
Sith Lord at that time, but from the moment in episode 2 when he cuts off his hand to that point, they fought multiple times.
Hmm.
So, and Anakin failed those times, but then, that last time he just destroyed him. And that fight, I thought was one of my favorite fights.
Yeah,
Lightsabers, like, he didn't have that moment where, like, okay, I feel the force. He schooled him. He took that old man behind the back and ended it for him.
Yeah, but again, like Seth was talking about, like that feels like my technique is better than yours. Whereas like the fighting styles I feel like directly reflect the person more than like, oh, this is the school of Yoda. Or like, oh, I was
right.
instructed by Mace Windu, who is the strongest lightsaber user of the Jedi Temple. Like it felt very like less like instructional and more reflective of the character who is bearing the lightsaber, which like I think is interesting.
Yeah,
Who said that? Someone made it in. I don't know if it was in one of the animated movies, but they made a comment. Oh, you're. Oh, I know. It was in Jedi Fallen Order. Remember when the main Sith or the Inquisitor? She's like, oh, you're you were taught by so and so because you fight stance whatever.
Yeah,
Remember
Zero
exactly.
to
that?
Paul. Yeah,
Yeah. So when you said that
It clicks.
yeah.
yeah, and I like. I think I love the scene because it's in this really cool dark snowy forest, and it's shot really well. The colors are really great. You can really feel the impact of the lightsabers, and Rey does beat Kylo Ren, albeit a weakened Kylo Ren, um, that was trying to convert her instead of kill her. But then we kind of are left up to interpretation for the next, like you said, Coach, 3 years for until the last Jedi. Um, and then we kind of just get the ending where Rey comes down, and I do think this scene is very bad and weird. Rey comes
Which
back
one?
down to the planet that Leia was on, the rebellion base,
Yep.
gets out and hugs Leia.
Yes.
And if you think about it, that scene makes absolutely no sense in the context of the
Exactly.
plot because she had not even met Leia at that point.
Sure, it doesn't make sense plot wise, but like again, this is like as the audience member, like it makes perfect sense to us. You know, it's super weird, and like I agree that it's like bad because it doesn't make sense contextually within the movie, but also like that is a language that the movie spectator completely understands because it's just like the person who's with her husband's for death and then like this woman who we spent our entire childhoods with, you know, and so like it makes sense, and then it's only like after we're just like, wait, how does she know her? Like,
Yeah, you're
you
right.
know, it's like at the moment you're just like, okay, thank God, I'm glad like Leia got to hug someone, but then you're like, wait,
But
why her? That doesn't check out at all.
Right.
and the thing is it wasn't just a hug like, you know, it was a hug like she was a family member. And that
Exactly.
sticks to me. It sticks to me to this day when I watch that scene that that's not a regular hug.
Yeah.
So, and I know
It
that's
does very
nitpicking,
much.
but
No, that's not nitpicky. I totally agree that she was clearly supposed to be someone like recognizable.
Yes.
And so like I don't know like if she just like because Finn was saying like I got to save my friend Ray, and I'm sure like could be like who the fuck is Ray? Like who is that? And then it's just like
right.
then she sees her and she's like oh it's you. You know like
Yeah.
there totally could have been something like that, but they're just God what a weird topsy turvy journey that was.
And then we get another weird scene that I think echoes that at the end where Rey comes down. I mean, I guess I'm forgetting a giant part where R2D2 wakes up and shows the rest of the map, which is a cool scene. I like the R2D2 wake up
Oh,
scene.
I love
BB-8's
R2, man.
super,
I love R2.
It's cool. It's also
BB-8's
weird
super
where
excited.
it's also weird where it's just like, all right, so you're telling me you couldn't take out like the flash card in R2 and like figure out the map to Luke Skywalker like an hour and a half ago. Like that's like more of like a plot point where I'm like, whatever.
It doesn't make much sense why R2D2 woke up then, unless he's
exactly
something sort of Rey.
And again, it's like because the cameras were on now. That's exactly
right.
And so like again, that's like that's whatever. But it's also like, in the grand scheme of things, that doesn't matter. So I'm not going to be upset about it.
But then we do get another weird scene that is cool at first. It was only until later when I watched it again and thought about it. When Rey walks up to Luke and extends the arm out for the lightsaber, and then neither of them say anything or move for like 45 seconds as the camera swirls around them. And it looks cool at first. And then you're like, wait a second, that's pretty weird.
I love that scene. I love that scene so much. Like just from like a technical, because like they clearly shot that on location. They clearly shot it in like one take. I'm just like, that's really impressive.
Yeah.
Like,
I just wish she would have been like, are you Luke Skywalker? Or am I in the right spot?
Please.
You know? Like, does this look familiar?
Right. Look what I got.
But yeah, and I think the reveal of Luke at the end, I remember being really hyped up about that. I was like, oh man, there he is. There's Luke. And then the movie ended, and I just wanted more. I just wanted more at the end of episode 7. I was just so thrilled about that movie with a lot of questions that unfortunately would not be answered the way I thought they would later on.
Especially like who was Snoke? That was one of the biggest questions, along with whose parents are Rey, right? That's what we wanted to know. And in episode 8, we didn't get really anything.
Also, this is going to sound so dumb, but I want you guys to be completely honest. So like as the planet's crumbling and like Domhnall Gleeson or whatever is like talking to Snoke, and we get like that giant projection of Snoke, I legit thought Snoke was 30 feet tall.
Oh, really?
Did anyone else think that he was just like a super large, imposing dude? Like I thought this was like Star Wars like getting a little weird again, which I was super into.
Right.
And so I got that impression, and then like of course I'm just like, oh well, I'm an idiot. Like of course.
No,
like,
I didn't think
5'8" and old. Like
I just thought it was like the imposing like emperor status type of Snoke, where he was like, they make this giant hologram to honor him, but I don't know if you guys remember, there was a lot of theories about Snoke when it was coming out, about like maybe he was Darth Plagueis, maybe he was. I remember Mace Windu being tossed around in there. They were analyzing like the scar on the head and the face. in the ring.
I never thought it would be Palpatine because I thought that would be so lazy. I was
Yeah.
like, that's so dumb. There's no way they're gonna do that.
Yeah.
But then, like, I as like a fan of the comics, I'm like, maybe it's a clone of Palpatine because, like, the Dark Empire series, like,
Yeah, they did that in the Dark Empire series.
well, and also like the Starkiller base isn't that different than like the gun they made in the Dark Empire series. I thought that was like a
Right.
big inspiration. But yeah, I really wanted to be Plagueis because like I was like, oh, maybe we'll finally get an explanation for who that dude is, and
Yeah. But
Palpatine took him out.
yeah, but also like if he has the ability to like create
Fake
life
death.
and
Yeah.
escape death, I'm just like, okay, let's see how good he was at that.
right. So and then that wraps up episode 7. Any closing thoughts about episode 7, gentlemen?
It's a good movie. It felt very Star Wars, but it missed on a few things. Well, a little bit more than a few, but it's my favorite one of the sequel trilogy. I'll put it that way.
Okay. It's funny. I remember liking it, and then like the longer I went without it, I was just like, I mean, like it's kind of boring, actually, And then I saw Last Jedi, and Last Jedi made me like Force Awakens a lot more. Because I didn't like Last Jedi the first couple times I saw it. I really had like a big turnaround with that. And then I still didn't like The Last Jedi, and then I saw The Last Skywalker, or like The Rise of Skywalker. I can't even remember what episode 9 is called. And then that made me really like The Last Jedi. And so it's like every Star Wars movie that came out just made me appreciate the one that came out before it so much more.
Well, that's similar to me with the Clone Wars animated series. Once I remember a few years ago when all of the steelbook cases, the individual steelbook cases were coming out. I'm like, I'm not going to get 1 and 2 because I'm not a big fan of those. But then I went back and watched them after watching all of the Clone Wars and Rebels, and I'm like, oh my God, this is better than what I give it credit for. So of course I got the steelbooks on that.
Sure.
So
I have liked the prequels more the further I've gotten away from them. I still don't like episode 1 because I think there's too much nonsense that goes on in episode 1.
Way too much exposition. Yeah.
But I'll drop a bombshell on you guys. I've loved episode 7 from the moment I saw it, and the only time I stopped really liking it was because I watched it too much, and I had to take a break, and I came back. Episode 7 is my second favorite Star Wars movie of all time.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it is. It is my second favorite Star Wars movie of all time. And I have a really weird ranking of my Star Wars movies, but I absolutely love episode 7, and I when I watch it, I try to remember the context in which I watched it the first time, before I knew what episode 8 and 9 were, because when I think about episode 8 and 9, it kind of ruins episode 7 for me, and the mysterious nature of episode 7, where we had so many questions, and they set up these great mysteries. But when I watch it in a vacuum, I absolutely love episode 7. I think it's fantastic. It's, especially that final scene, that lightsaber fight at the end. Unfortunately, I don't think the sequel trilogy ever reaches that level ever again, but I think is the top for me.
It's really interesting. I'm going to save this for episode 8, but like I think the fact that episode 8 takes place immediately after episode 7 is a problem.
Oh, okay.
And I think the fact that like episode 9 takes place, it doesn't seem like that long after, because there's like years between episodes 4 and 5, and there's like years between 5 and 6. Although it doesn't feel like years in 5 and 6, it's just like implied years.
It's not shown well
yeah.
in the original trilogy, but there is like a long time between the movies.
I don't think there's a long time, is there?
Yeah, there is. There's like 2 or 3 years between episodes.
2 or 3, yeah.
Or between episodes like 2 and 3, and then like a year between episodes like, or not 2 and 3, 3 and 4, and then 4 and 5, and then like 5 and 6.
Yeah, but then like episode 8 takes place literally like minutes after episode 7, which I think is like a big problem.
I do
And
too.
I'll go into like why I think that's a big problem when we do our episode 8, because I assume we're doing that next, right?
I can't wait. I've had a blast doing this.
Yeah, this is super fun. Also, I don't think the next one's going to be 3 hours because we don't have to talk about
Right.
reintroducing ourselves to Star Wars, or Star Wars reintroducing itself to our lives, however you want
Yes.
to look at it.
Because that took up like a solid 45 minutes to an hour of
Yep.
the beginning and the speculation.
Well, we're at 2:58, so
Yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed.
I loved every second of it, brother.
Yeah.
I loved it too. This is great.
And we will reconvene for episode 8. I hope the audience members, if you guys listen to, I hope you enjoyed the more of an open aired conversation around episode 7 that wasn't full of rage and more of honest discussion. That's why I was kind of looking forward to the sequel trilogy. It's more honest discussion about Star Wars, man, because there's just not enough of it. It's always just one side or the other and fighting constantly, and it's not enough to be a Star Wars fan. You have to be a fan of a certain special part of Star Wars nowadays.
Right.
So
I think if they, real quick before we end, if they were to do an animated series similar to Clone Wars, but in this time area, I think it would do a lot of justice. It would help fix a lot, I think.
well, there's a lot of rumors.
I don't love the Clone Wars cartoon, and like I don't think I've even finished it, just because there was like episodes that Netflix added, and then there was episodes that Disney added, and it's like I don't know what I've seen and what I haven't seen.
Mhm.
But I will say that stuff definitely made me appreciate the prequels more.
Right.
And so
Same
I think
here.
if there's like more like sort of like world building between episode 7 and 8, and then 8 and 9, like I think that would actually go a long way towards like winning people over, because I think the Clone Wars eventually won people over on the prequels.
Yes, I think so too. And there's a lot of rumors from really reputable sources that say the next season of Mandalorian is going to be a time skip into the sequel trilogy, and that we're going to see Rey back as a Jedi.
Well, if you think about it,
Hell
the
yeah.
Mandalorian
I'm in.
is
Yeah,
the
me too.
Mandalorian is like a year before the Force Awakens. It's like really close.
I
I
thought it
don't
was
think
like
so.
20 years before The Force Awakens.
Is
Like,
it?
I thought Force
Yeah.
Awakens was like 25 years after Return of the Jedi, and then The Mandalorian was like 5 years after
Okay,
Return
no,
of the Jedi.
I'm sorry. So Battle of Jakku I think that's it. That's the Boba Fett is like a year after the Battle of Jakku, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's where.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to stop recording before we start rambling on about the Mandalorian and rumors and speculation. So I'm sure we'll get there at some point. Thank you guys for joining me. I really enjoyed this. I appreciate you sitting down for 3 hours. And we will do this again for episode 8.
Hell yeah.
Peace.